Hey, I'm Mr. Ghost. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. In a piano player for the rich and famous, my recent client demanded some strange things. I've been playing piano for the wealthy for almost 15 years now. Ever since graduating from Juilliard with a degree I couldn't afford and debt I couldn't manage, I found that my classical training was best suited for providing ambiance to those who viewed Bach and Chopin as mere background to their conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes. My name is Everett Carlyle. I am, or was, a pianist for the elite. I've played in penthouses overlooking Central Park, in Hamptons estates with ocean views that stretch to forever, on yachts anchored off the coast of Monaco, and in ballrooms where a single chandelier cost more than what most people make in 5 years. I'm writing this because I need to document what happened. I need to convince myself that I didn't imagine it all, though God knows I wish I had. I've been having trouble sleeping. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. I hear the sounds. I smell that, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. It started 3 weeks ago with an email from a name I didn't recognize. Thaddeus Wexler. The subject line read, "Exclusive engagement, substantial compensation." This wasn't unusual. Most of my clients found me through word of mouth or my website, and the wealthy often lead with money as if it's the only language that matters. Usually they're right. The email was brief and formal. "Mr. Carlyle, your services have been recommended by a mutual acquaintance for a private gathering of considerable importance. The engagement requires absolute discretion and will be compensated at $25,000 for a single evening's performance. Should you be interested, please respond to confirm your availability for April 18th. A car will collect you at 7 p.m. sharp. Further details will be provided upon your agreement to our terms. Regards, Thaddeus Wexler, the Ishtar Society. $25,000. For one night, I'd played for billionaires who balked at my usual rate of $2,000. This was either a joke or, well, I wasn't sure what else it could be, but curiosity got the better of me, and the balance in my checking account didn't hurt either. I responded the same day. To my surprise, I received a call within an hour from a woman who identified herself only as Miss Harlow. Her voice was crisp, professional, with that particular cadence that comes from years of managing difficult people and situations. "Mr. Carlyle, thank you for your prompt response. Mr. Wexler was confident you would be interested in our offer. Before we proceed, I must emphasize the importance of discretion. The event you will be attending is private in the truest sense of the word." "I understand. I've played for many private events. Confidentiality is standard in my contracts." "This goes beyond standard confidentiality, Mr. Carlyle. The guests at this gathering value their privacy above all else. You will be required to sign additional agreements, including an NDA with substantial penalties." Something about her tone made me pause. There was an edge to it, a warning barely contained beneath the professional veneer. "What exactly is this event?" I asked. "An annual meeting of the Ishtar Society. It's a philanthropic organization with a long history. The evening includes dinner, speeches, and a ceremony. Your role is to provide accompaniment throughout." "What kind of music are you looking for?" "Classical, primarily." "Well, provide a specific program closer to the date. Mr. Wexler has requested that you prepare Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, as well as selected pieces by Debussy and Satie. Simple enough requests." Still, something felt off. "And the location?" "A private estate in the Hudson Valley. As mentioned, transportation will be provided. You'll be returned to your residence when the evening concludes." I hesitated, but the thought of $25,000, enough to cover 6 months of my Manhattan rent, pushed me forward. "All right, I'm in." "Excellent. A courier will deliver paperwork tomorrow. Please sign all documents and return them with the courier. Failure to do so will nullify our arrangement." The paperwork arrived as promised. A thick manila envelope containing the most extensive non-disclosure agreement I'd ever seen. It went beyond the usual confidentiality clauses to include penalties for even discussing the existence of the event itself. I would forfeit not just my fee, but potentially face a lawsuit for damages up to $5 million if I breached any terms. There was also a list of instructions. Wear formal black attire, tuxedo, white shirt, black bow tie. Bring no electronic devices of any kind. Do not speak unless spoken to. Remain at the piano unless instructed otherwise. Play only the music provided in the accompanying program. Do not acknowledge guests unless they acknowledge you first. The last instruction was underlined. What happens at the society remains at the society. The music program was enclosed as well, a carefully curated selection of melancholy and contemplative pieces. Debussy's Clair de Lune, Satie's Gymnopédies, several Chopin nocturnes and preludes, and Bach's Goldberg variations, all beautiful pieces, but collectively they created a somber, almost funereal atmosphere. I should have walked away then. The money was incredible, yes, but everything about this felt wrong. However, like most people facing a financial windfall, I rationalized. Rich people are eccentric. Their parties are often strange, governed by antiquated rules of etiquette. This would just be another night, playing for people who saw me as furniture with fingers. How wrong I was. April 18th arrived. At precisely 7 p.m., a black Suburban with tinted windows pulled up outside my apartment building in Morningside Heights. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with a close-cropped haircut, who introduced himself only as Reed, held the door open without a word. The vehicle's interior was immaculate, with soft leather seats and a glass partition separating me from the driver. On the seat beside me was a small box with a card that read, "Please put this on before we reach our destination." Inside was a black blindfold made of heavy silk. This was crossing a line. "Excuse me," I called to the driver. I wasn't informed about a blindfold. The partition lowered slightly. "Mr. Wexler's instructions, sir. Security protocols. I can return you to your residence if you prefer, but the engagement would be cancelled. $25,000. I put on the blindfold. We drove for what felt like 2 hours, though I couldn't be certain. The roads eventually became less smooth. We were no longer on a highway but winding through what I assumed were rural roads. Finally, the vehicle slowed and came to a stop. I heard gravel crunching beneath tires, then silence as the engine was turned off. "We've arrived, Mr. Carlyle. You may remove the blindfold now." I blinked as my eyes adjusted to the fading daylight. Before me stood what could only be described as a mansion, though that word seemed insufficient. It was a sprawling stone structure that looked like it belonged in the English countryside rather than upstate New York. Gothic in design, with towering spires and large windows that reflected the sunset in hues of orange and red. The grounds were immaculate, perfectly manicured gardens, stone fountains and pathways lined with unlit torches. Reed escorted me to a side entrance, where we were met by a slender woman in a black dress. Her hair was pulled back so tightly, it seemed to stretch her pale skin. "Mr. Carlyle and Miss Harlow." We spoke on the phone. Her handshake was brief and cold. "The guests will begin arriving shortly. I'll show you to the ballroom, where you'll be performing." We walked through service corridors, avoiding what I assumed were the main halls of the house. The decor was old money, oil paintings in gilt frames, antique furniture, Persian rugs on hardwood floors. Everything spoke of wealth accumulated over generations. The ballroom was vast, with a ceiling that rose at least 30 feet, adorned with elaborate plasterwork and a chandelier that must have held 100 bulbs. At one end was a raised platform where a gleaming black Steinway grand piano waited. The room was otherwise empty, though dozens of round tables with black tablecloths had been arranged across the polished floor, each set with fine china, crystal, and silver. "You'll play from here," Miss Harlow said, leading me to the piano. "The program is on the stand. Please familiarize yourself with the sequence. Timing is important this evening." I looked at the program again. It was the same selection I'd been practicing, but now each piece had specific timing noted beside it. The Chopin Nocturne was marked for 9:45 p.m., with critical written in red beside it. "What happens at 9:45? I asked. Miss Harlow's expression didn't change. "The ceremony begins. Mr. Wexler will signal you." She checked her watch. "It's 7:30. Now, guests will begin arriving at 8. There's water on the side table. Please help yourself. But I must remind you not to leave the piano area under any circumstances once the first guest arrives. What if I need to use the restroom? Use it now. Once you're at the piano, you remain there until the evening concludes. How long will that be? Until it's over. Her tone made it clear that was all the information I would receive. One final thing, Mr. Carlyle. No matter what you see or hear tonight, you are to continue playing. Do not stop until Mr. Wexler indicates the evening has concluded. Is that clear? A chill ran through me. What exactly am I going to see or hear? Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw something like pity. The Ishtar Society has traditions that may seem unusual to outsiders. Your job is to play, not to understand. Remember that, and you'll leave with your fee and without complications. With that cryptic warning, she left me alone in the massive room. I sat at the piano, testing the keys. The instrument was perfectly tuned, responsive in a way that only comes from regular maintenance by master technicians. Under different circumstances, I would have been thrilled to play such a fine piano. Over the next half hour, staff began to enter, servers in formal attire, security personnel positioned discreetly around the perimeter, and technicians adjusting lighting. No one spoke to me or even looked in my direction. At precisely 8 p.m., the main doors opened, and the first guests began to arrive. They entered in pairs and small groups, all impeccably dressed in formal evening wear, the men in tailored tuxedos, the women in gowns that likely cost more than most cars. But what struck me immediately was how they moved, with a practiced grace that seemed almost choreographed, and with expressions that betrayed neither joy nor anticipation, but something closer to solemn reverence. I began to play as instructed, starting with Bach's Goldberg variations. The acoustics in the room were perfect, the notes resonating clearly throughout the space. As I played, I observed the guests. They were uniformly affluent, but diverse in age and ethnicity. Some I recognized: a tech billionaire known for his controversial data mining practices, a former cabinet secretary who'd left politics for private equity, the heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune, a film director whose work had grown increasingly disturbing over the years. They mingled with practiced smiles that never reached their eyes. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, but I noticed that many guests barely touched either. There was an air of anticipation, of waiting. At 8:30, a hush fell over the room as a tall, silver-haired man entered. Even from a distance, his presence commanded attention. This, I assumed, was Thaddeus Wexler. He moved through the crowd, accepting deferential nods and brief handshakes. He didn't smile either. Dinner was served at precisely 8:45, just as I transitioned to Debussy. The conversation during the meal was subdued, lacking the usual animated chatter of high society gatherings. These people weren't here to network or be seen. They were here for something else. At 9:30, as I began Satie's first gymnopédie, the doors opened again. A new group entered, but these were not guests. They were different. About 20 people filed in, escorted by security personnel. They were dressed in simple white clothing, loose pants and tunics that looked almost medical. They moved uncertainly, some stumbling slightly. Their expressions ranged from confusion to mild fear. Most notably, they looked ordinary, not wealthy, not polished, regular people who seemed completely out of place in this setting. The guests watched their entrance with an intensity that made my fingers falter on the keys. I quickly recovered, forcing myself to focus on the music rather than the bizarre scene unfolding before me. The newcomers were led to the center of the room, where they stood in a loose cluster, looking around with increasing unease. Some attempted to speak to their escorts, but were met with stony silence. At 9:43, Thaddeus Wexler rose from his seat at the central table. The room fell completely silent, except for my playing. He raised a crystal glass, filled with dark red liquid. "Friends," his voice was deep, resonant, "we gather once more in service to the great balance. For prosperity, there must be sacrifice. For abundance, there must be scarcity. For us to rise, others must fall. It has always been so. It will always be so." The guests raised their glasses in unison. To the balance they intoned. Wexler turned to face the group in white. "You have been chosen to serve a purpose greater than yourselves. Your sacrifice sustains our world. For this, we are grateful." I was now playing Chopin's Nocturne, the piece marked critical on my program. My hands moved automatically, while my mind raced to understand what was happening. Sacrifice? What did that mean? One of the people in white, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, stepped forward. You said this was about a job opportunity. You said. A security guard moved swiftly, pressing something to the man's neck that made him crumple to his knees, gasping. Wexler continued as if there had been no interruption. Tonight we renew our covenant. Tonight we ensure another year of prosperity. As the nocturne reached its middle section, the mood in the room shifted palpably. The guests rose from their tables and formed a circle around the confused group in white. Each guest produced a small obsidian knife from inside their formal wear. My blood ran cold, but I kept playing. Miss Harlowe's words echoed in my mind. No matter what you see or hear tonight, you are to continue playing. Begin, Wexler commanded. What happened next will haunt me until my dying day. The guests moved forward in unison, each selecting one of the people in white. There was a moment of confused struggle before the guards restrained the victims. Then, with practiced precision, each guest made a small cut on their chosen victim's forearm, collecting drops of blood in their crystal glasses. This wasn't a massacre, as I had initially feared. It was something more ritualized, more controlled, but no less disturbing. The people in white were being used in some sort of blood ritual, their fear and confusion providing a stark contrast to the methodical actions of the wealthy guests. After collecting the blood, the guests returned to the circle, raising their glasses once more. With this offering, we bind our fortunes, Wexler intoned. With their essence, we ensure our ascension. The guests drank from their glasses. All of them. They drank the blood of strangers as casually as one might sip champagne. I felt bile rise in my throat, but forced myself to continue playing. The nocturne transitioned to its final section, my fingers trembling slightly on the keys. The people in white were led away, looking dazed and frightened. I noticed something else, small bandages on their arms, suggesting this wasn't the first collection they had endured. As the last notes of the nocturne faded, Wexler turned to face me directly for the first time. His eyes were dark, calculating. He gave a small nod, and I moved on to the next piece as instructed. The remainder of the evening proceeded with a surreal normalcy. The guests resumed their seats. Dessert was served, and conversation gradually returned, though it remained subdued. No one mentioned what had just occurred. No one seemed disturbed by it. It was as if they had simply performed a routine business transaction, rather than participated in a blood ritual. I played mechanically, my mind racing. Who were those people in white? Where had they come from? What happened to them after they were led away? The questions pounded in my head in rhythm with the music. At 11:30, Wexler rose again. The covenant is renewed. Our path is secured for another year. May prosperity continue to flow to those who understand its true cost. The guests applauded politely, then began to depart in the same orderly fashion they had arrived. Within 30 minutes, only Wexler, Miss Harlowe, and a few staff remained in the ballroom. Wexler approached the piano as I finished the final piece on the program. Excellent performance, Mr. Carlyle. Your reputation is well deserved. His voice was smooth, cultured. Thank you, I managed, struggling to keep my expression neutral. May I ask what I just witnessed? A slight smile curved his lips. You witnessed nothing, Mr. Carlyle. That was our arrangement. You played beautifully, and now you will return home, $25,000 richer, with nothing but the memory of providing music for an exclusive gathering. Those people are participating in a medical trial, he interrupted smoothly. Quite voluntarily, I assure you. They're compensated generously for their contributions, much as you are for yours. I didn't believe him. Couldn't believe him. But I also understood the implicit threat in his words. I had signed their documents. I had agreed to their terms. Of course, I said. I was merely curious about the unusual ceremony. Curiosity is natural, Wexler replied. Acting on it would be unwise. I trust you understand the difference. Miss Harlowe appeared at his side, holding an envelope. Your payment, Mr. Carlyle. As agreed, the car is waiting to take you back to the city. I took the envelope, feeling its substantial weight. Thank you for the opportunity. Perhaps we'll call on you again, Wexler said, though his tone made it clear this was unlikely. Remember our terms, Mr. Carlyle. What happens at the society remains at the society, I finished. Indeed. Good night. Reed was waiting by the same black Suburban. Once again I was asked to don the blindfold for the return journey. As we drove through the night, I clutched the envelope containing my fee and tried to process what I had witnessed. It wasn't until I was back in my apartment, counting the stacks of $100 bills, that the full impact hit me. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. $25,000. The price of my silence. The cost of my complicity. I've spent the past 3 weeks trying to convince myself that there was a reasonable explanation for what I saw, that Wexler was telling the truth about medical trials, that the whole thing was some elaborate performance art for the jaded ultra-wealthy. But I know better. Those people in white wearing volunteers, their confusion and fear were genuine, and the way the guests consumed their blood with such reverence, such practiced ease, this wasn't their first ceremony. I've tried researching the Ishtar Society, but found nothing. Not a mention, not a whisper, as if it doesn't exist. I've considered going to the police, but what would I tell them? That I witnessed rich people drinking a few drops of blood in a ritual, without evidence, without even being able to say where this mansion was located. Who would believe me? And then there's the NDA, $5 million in penalties. They would ruin me. And based on what I saw, financial ruin might be the least of my concerns if I crossed them. So, I've remained silent. Until now. Writing this down is a risk, but I need to document what happened before I convince myself it was all a dream. Last night I received another email. Mr. Carlyle, your services are requested for our winter solstice gathering on December 21st. The compensation will be doubled for your return engagement. A car will collect you at 7 p.m. The society was pleased with your performance and discretion. Regards, Thaddeus Wexler, the Ishtar Society. $50,000. For one night of playing piano while the elite perform their blood rituals. I should delete the email. I should move apartments, change my name, disappear. But $50,000, then a part of me, a dark, curious part I never knew existed, wants to go back, to understand what I witnessed, to know what happens to those people in white after they led away, to learn what the great balance truly means. I have until December to decide. Until then, I'll keep playing at regular society parties, providing background music for the merely wealthy rather than the obscenely powerful. I'll smile and nod and pretend. I'm just a pianist, nothing more. But every time I close my eyes, I see Wexler raising his glass. I hear his words about sacrifice and balance. And I wonder how many others have been in my position. How many witnessed the ceremony and chose money over morality. How many returned for a second performance. And most troubling of all, if I do go back, will I ever be allowed to leave again? The winter solstice is approaching. I have a decision to make. The Ishtar Society is waiting for my answer. Taphophobia. Claustrophobia is one of the most common fears in the human race. I never used to have a problem in enclosed spaces. I actually found them kind of comforting at times, but there comes a time where some previous comforts can become the worst experience of your life. My night started out pretty good for once. It was a Saturday, and my friend texted me, asking if I had wanted to go out to a club and have some drinks. It had been a while since I had been out, due to work, and honestly just being extremely lazy, but I had a good feeling about tonight, so I agreed. We met at a smaller club downtown, and started to drink. It was great. We drank, joked around, and even flirted with a couple women at the club. I was on my 4th drink of the night, when things started to go wrong. I'm not a big drinker, but when I'm drinking beer it usually takes more than 4 to mess me up. But this time was different. I had just finished it when I suddenly got incredibly dizzy. Like so dizzy the room was spinning and it took my entire willpower not to throw up all over the bar. I felt sick. I looked for my friend, wanting to tell him that I wanted to leave, but no matter where I looked I couldn't find him. I tried to call out to him, but it felt as if my tongue was tied in a knot and also weighed hundreds of pounds. As I looked around I started feeling worse. My tongue still felt heavy, but now it also felt like it was swelling. It took everything I had to force myself to breathe. The bar felt even more cramped, like every person decided they needed to all go to the bar where I was standing and press against me. I felt my panic rise as I struggled to maintain my focus on breathing. I had to get out of this bar. I need fresh air. I need to breathe. I stumbled and pushed against the crowd, eventually forcing my way through everyone, and almost falling through a side door. I was in a side alley, and I crashed against the opposite wall, bracing myself against it as I tried breathing. My breath came out faster and faster. I was starting to hyperventilate. As I struggled to regain my breath, I realized everything was going dark. I started to panic even more. I tried calling out to someone, anyone to help me, but my tongue was too heavy for me to use it. Everything went dark, as my last thoughts were of me begging for someone to save me. I don't know how long I was out, but I wished I had never woken up. The first thing I noticed as I regained consciousness was how tight my chest was. I was laying on a hard surface, and every time I breathed in my chest and back, I would hit something hard. I realized I could only take short breaths with how cramped I was. The next thing I noticed was that my arms were positioned above my head. They weren't tied up or anything, but the space I was in was so tight I couldn't put them down. I slowly opened my eyes, my eyelids feeling like they had weights tied to them, and all I saw was darkness. I moved my hands around, trying to feel what the space I was in was. It was rough, hard, and I almost immediately got something stuck in my finger. I was surrounded by wood. I realized, was I in some kind of box? I thought to myself, that's when it hit me. The smell. With my short breaths, I didn't notice it at first, but as I awoke more and more, I noticed the smell. Dirt. My head was turned to the side, because the space was so small I couldn't move it up or down. My cheek was pressed against the wood, but all I could smell was the wet, earthy scent of dirt. That's when I felt the sprinkle of dirt falling all over my body. I wasn't just in a box. I was in a casket. I wasn't just somewhere. I was buried alive. I wasn't safe. The casket was creaking and groaning under the weight of the earth, and the dirt was slowly filling the tiny space that I occupied. Oh God, someone help me. I screamed as loud as I could. My breathing quickened as I started to have a panic attack. I screamed even louder. I bawled. I even prayed for the first time in years. I thrashed around as much as I could in the tight space, my back and head getting scratched really badly as they were rubbed against the rough wood. I banged my hands against the floor as best as I could, before I heard a loud crack. With that, even more dirt started to pour into the casket. I panicked even more, before suddenly I randomly thought of a video I saw a while ago. It was one of those weird videos that is a cartoon, but it teaches you weird stuff. This one, helpfully, was how to survive being buried alive. As this video randomly popped into my mind, I struggled to remember what they said in the video. I don't know if all of what they said is the best thing to do in this situation, but I would try absolutely anything in order to get out. As the video slowly came back to me, I remembered the first step. Don't panic. Well, too late for that. I immediately tried to calm myself. I remember they said you run out of air faster if you panic. I managed to calm myself as much as I could. As I tried to think of the next step, it was something about my shirt. I think it was to wrap it around my face, to try and keep the dirt out of my nose and mouth. I tried to move my arms to pull at my shirt, but the space was too tight for me to move them down. The space by my hands made even tighter with the dirt spilling through the hole I managed to crack in the wood. I will have to skip that step. The next step was I needed to break open the casket and try to pull myself through the dirt. I already started that step. I tried moving my hands to make the hole even bigger. It took what seemed like hours, but I slowly managed to pry some boards out and push them to the side. It got harder and harder as even more dirt seemed to flow into the casket with me. I tried digging through the earth to make room for me to breathe, but it was like mud. It seemed to flow faster than I could move it. I kept digging and prying the boards away. I kept digging, now having to hold my breath. The mud seemed to try and force its way up my nose, into my eyes, and into my mouth. I felt the panic rise again, but the thought of making it to the surface forced my body into digging faster and faster. I was now completely out of the casket. I remembered the video saying most buried alive victims are not buried that deep. I must be getting closer to the surface. My lungs burned. I don't know how long I can keep holding my breath. My eyes are closed, but everything is going dark again. My arms hurt. I can't get out. The earth is surrounding me, swallowing me, crushing me. As I struggled to keep digging, another random bit of that video came to me. Not an actual part of the video, but a comment someone left. This is really helpful, but what do you do if someone buries you face down? Still death. The look on the man's face was telling. To her, this news was a glimpse into a future of prosperity. But like a talented artist's brushstrokes, the man's expression shifted from a tired to sorrowful expression. With a sigh, the man scrunched his fingers on his wrinkles and gestured to be excused. She watched as he sat on the bed. Is this not great news? Have we not been attempting for a while now? She said. I'm just taken aback. I wasn't expecting our attempts would yield anything more fruitful than further doctor visits. But for now, I must thank God and cherish our miracle. Our miracle child. She felt a nervous insinuation at the beats of their conversation, but did nothing more than return to her sitcom on television as the man readied water to his shower. Part 1. Now months later, the man spoke less horridly of the child, seemingly appreciative of the miracle. He left for work, and she cleaned up the house, stopping occasionally to thank God for this miracle. She started in the kitchen before moving into the bathroom. In the halls under her steps was a creaky floorboard. The creaking made her stop every time, her face appearing to cringe thereafter. This day she lowered herself onto the floor and examined the problem board. It indented slightly into the floor, as if nothing held it in place aside screws from the original conception of the home. She attempted to pry the floorboard, but soon stopped at her futile attempts to detach the plank. She finished the dining room when it was time for her husband to return, but a knock was absent. She waited in the living room on the couch, a cross around her neck. The television was on, playing a soap opera the woman rarely perceived. Instead, her attention was on the window peeping outdoors, a glass prison from sovereignty. She began to doze off, clutching the cross, to which she frequently glazed at beforehand, before the sound of gravel rubbing against the familiar tires of the Jeep driven by her husband. When she glanced at the clock, it was 5:32. The man knocked on the door. Shortly thereafter was answered by the cheerful woman he pledged his vows to 5 years ago. He smiled a grin, similar to a faux pearl necklace. He quickly excused himself to the restroom, and the peculiar behavior unnoted by the dopey woman. She heard the floor creak as he closed the door behind him. He soon emerged with arid skin all around. "What were you thinking for dinner?" the elated woman asked the man. "I mean, it's your special day. Shouldn't it be up to you?" "It's our special day. I'll choose tomorrow." With that, the man suggested steak and baked potatoes with a greenery of asparagus. The man was held up on his phone, seated onto the couch, his wife working tirelessly in the kitchen. "You know, someday I won't be able to cook right. You'll have to cook for both of us, without a microwave. You should be taking notes. I'm expecting no better than your best, by my second month." She giggled and the man glanced over grinning. When the steaks were done on the pan, she set them to rest, continuing the previously cooked asparagus. "Hey, do you think you could run to the store for me?" the man announced. "I'm sorta busy right now," she started. "Well, why not get some practice with the basics? What is more basic than taking out potatoes from the oven and stirring a pot of asparagus?" "Well, I guess, just don't burn anything. The asparagus is boiling, and the potatoes are on a timer. I should be fine," he responded. "Okay, but what do you want me to get?" "A crowbar." "For the floorboard?" "Yeah, I want to make sure there's no rot. The house is pretty old." I know. Well, what if there is rot there? If you go to the hardware store, there should be fungicide there. Maybe pick one up and make sure it's safe for indoor use." "Okay." She picked up the keys from the coat hanger and walked out with her purse in hand to the Jeep. She drove a while before stopping inside the large warehouse of merchandise, asking around before getting a hold of a crowbar and fungicide. She returned at the door, knocking before hearing hurried scuttling inside. With a loud exclamation, she heard pounding on the inside. The eventual opening of the door welcomed her to a surprise. Candles were lit with large wine glasses, brimming with crimson liquid on each side of the now clothed table. There were silver platters covered with toppers surrounding my cutlery atop a large napkin. She merely teared up, kissing her cross as if it were a Friday. She likewise embraced the man, kissing him as if he were the carpenter. The night continued celebration. The dinner unveiled from its thinly clad secrecy. The sips of the pricey Syrah wine widened the grins of all, and much delight emerged from the woman's delectable steaks. The sides were outshined, but their flavor was exacerbated with each cup of wine. The woman was a lightweight, soon, beginning to act out in a fashion the man found wholeheartedly entertaining. The wine began to distort her perception, the face of her husband growing ever more perfect. They both rose up out of their seats, the man standing on the table proclaiming gibberish, indulged by the enamored woman, before tumbling down and throwing the sheet off the table. With it took the dishes of their date, shattering all glasses except the bottle of wine. With this the man sobered little more than enough to stand, quickly scooping up the bottle and stuffing it into a top cupboard. The man glances at the woman, who smiles on him. The man then escorted the woman to the bedroom, happy, graceful, then lustful and obscene. The woman wakes to a loud reverberation, whose origin is followed into the hall. The woman in her promiscuous nightgown gazes at the man in the hall, crowbar in hand. "It is late now. Could this not wait till morning?" she asks, half-consciously. "I have work to get ready for in the morning, so I felt justified with my wakening. You're being loud. Could you try to quiet it down? My head is buzzing. Sure, good night." "Good night." The lady reawoke to cramps, constant contractions of corruption, as an aching reminder of tomorrow's sorrows. With grace, as if bestowed the gift from God along his heavens, she nimble-footedly staggered with an order, as if devised in the perfect image of chaos. Trekking through the home towards the bathroom, she stumbles over the floorboard with such grace, little to no noise can be heard, though noise was present. At her destination, she hurls out as if exorcised of her demons, vile and antithetical representation of sin. With every heave came a deep breath, repetition, making the woman mad. It was until now the man wasn't present, for his presence brought little solace in the woman. Though the man spoke, the woman did all but heed the speech. She felt more cramps in the uteral area, simultaneously bursting a crimson liquid out of her gown, no garment to soak the maroon stain now veiling the tile floor. Now fading in between waning consciousness that brought upon immense pain and a white outreaching void, beckoning her name with promises of painless lands. With each beckon loosened the grip of reality that had malformed into a living hell for the women. Through her painful days flashed glimpses of the interior of vehicles, ones she was unsure of familiarity with, until a bright light similar to the beckoning voice of salvation broke her, ebbing into death's hand and into Michael's sword. She felt as if she was experiencing karmic justice for the sin carried by the generations past. Then she returned from wakenness into the void, all light consumed into a noir pit. Until now, the woman has been ignorant of the circumstances that have befallen her, but she begins to hear and understand. She is able to see and recognize. She can see the white tiling of the hospital roof atop her, and she can feel pain, and she can hear the nurses surrounding her. "Hello?" She spoke with a propensity of inquiry, taking in all her surroundings. The air was fogged with a green and gaseous stench, paraded with the airborne particles. The woman gently tiptoed the bog, each step sinking her deeper into the reflective mirror. With the step out of the room, she had submerged out a land burning with sin. The gravel jabbed into her feet. The green air assimilated a smog of thick smoke no longer lined with nomads of unknown origin, but embers from eternal flames. Magma surrounded the path of deserted life, the glow coming no more from a light above but lava below. Her walls now reddish flesh engraved with faces of billions of pain. In front, mirrored as the above doorway, a line of jagged teeth following a pattern unrecognizable to human witnessed jaws. The gaping hole ahead a front to the lair of a malicious imitation of a perfect image. Reluctancy lined each step. A sharp groan coincided off the woman's tongue. The heat took a toll off the woman's supply of lasting water, an unquenchable thirst encapsulating her thoughts, but for reasons of uncertainty they were ignored. She continued her path. With each step taken, she became more knowledgeable, though she knew knowledge of this sort was to distract her from the goal of being swallowed. The horrors of steps made relinquishing her intent more meaningful, but to erase all until now would make all unmeaningful. As if sweat no longer dropped, but accumulated into her clothes, she began to gain what seemed tons. She relented as much time as possible, but a stride became too arduous for continuance. With grace of no belonging, Where she lay, her clothes came off as hair of the ungroomed problem dog. She writhed with rage for the impunity of the serpentine image ingrained into her brain with each slither of the dreadful tongue. The teachings of the snake rivaled a pain no other information could fester. It spoke of actions committed by the most unruly folk occupying depths far beyond worthy of Dante's ninth layer. As the woman neared atrocity's jaw, her souls began to melt and scrawl memories of her journeys of the coals below. Now, at the crevasse of teeth, she felt a burning heat now illuminating in the cavernous darkness she faced ahead. A barrier of sorts. A barrier to a tunnel whose mouth crowded with mystique of unease. And with the fascia of her feet, she leapt from the burning coals, running on no more than the all adrenaline her body was capable of producing, and landed on the cold, soft dirt, imitating the tongue of the beast. The woman began her excursion into the esophagus of a tunnel system that lay in front of her, her feet no longer scorching, still burned with the dirt filling the fibers of her muscles. Her exacerbated breath slowed to a scarcity of large inhales. She felt defeated but inexplicably found strength for every stride. The smog had cleared, and she could no longer see her hell behind her. Only an everlasting darkness resonated in the back of her head. The walls did not seem to be natural rock formations, but rather an ill-informed remaking of God's creation's esophagus. She began to belch after each step, the darkness seemingly still with her movements, until however long later did she see a glimpse of natural light. It was as though the blinds opened slightly on a sunny day. Her ferocity now doubled as to escape her incarceration. The ground began to splay open wickedly with roots of trees she believed to have seen before, but have never before been glanced upon by eyes filled with a semblance of morality. The gate stood before her, an imposing figurehead that blocked all views of what lay beyond. Inching closer and closer, she felt the fire start to singe deeper and deeper into her nerves. Shooting pains wrung out her body till she had recoiled to a fetal position on the cold floor. Its contrast seemed a mockery. She kept reaching for her neck, but could feel no more than her bare skin. She then felt weakness in her morale for the first time since her awakening. She tried to cry, but all tears had been shed. Her only mechanism of distraction was to meekly lift up her arm to draw a cross in the dirt where she lay. She stared at it, wishing the holy beast to be watching, and felt the lonesomeness leave with this thought. She reached around her neck once more and felt the golden cross where it customarily lied. She staggered back upon her skinless feet, and wretched at the thought of stepping forward, but the feeling of perseverance wriggled through her person, so she began to step ever so slightly nearer to the flame wall. She felt as it illuminated her skin. It burned with the same vigilance. At a foot away, she leapt. With a sensation she felt like no other, her skin peeled back as if caught on by the flames. It burned her flesh to the bone, disintegrating her nerves, yet she felt it all. The burning at an intensity she could not fathom before, Google's times the pain of her melting souls. She lay, a pile of bones, with nobody to execute any response to her suffering. And she lay, for what seemed an eternity, slowly regrowing herself from the feet up. Each fiber tied itself over another, until a muscle had formed in agonizing lengths of time. Each sensation was felt and dragged on for centuries, until the finality of her brain's completion, when she could finally control the flesh growths that had taken side to her eternal damnation. She grabbed herself up, reaching at her neck once more to feel a skin she had never felt before. It was colder, tougher, more rubbery. She continued lifting her scalpless body, and staggered out towards the sunlight promised by the fire before. When she reached the lower sphincter, she had reached a land that can only be encapsulated by a single word: perfect. The luscious garden was filled with fruit, a ripeness unknown to an average market, greenery so vibrant it seemed time had taken no effect on its age nor color. The woman saw a pool that streamed up to a waterfall coming out of the hollow of an enamoring tree. Weighing down the branches were fruits so colorful and voluptuous that even thinking about tasting them was fulfilling. When she reached down at her neck, she felt the warm steel of her cross again. She felt at peace, running with the grace of the inaugural being. She splashed into the holy pool, clearing grime the instant her toe had embarrassed the water. Her scalp finished forming, coming with it luscious locks with smoothness unrivaled. She rested a while, before awakening to the sound of birds chirping. She felt a hole burst into her stomach. Instinctually she reached for her cross to see the image had been tainted into the form of a serpentine beast. The metallic creature began to grow before her eyes, as hundreds of snakes began to fall in place of the fruits on the tree behind her. Before soon the water had drained and been superseded by a lake of snakes. The ground beneath her began to shake, as the once vibrant greenery dissolved into putrid and rotten shades that made all fruit shrivel and mold. The pool began to descend into the ground, too quick for the woman's attempts at escape as she had been coiled by hundreds of snakes. With bated breath, she closed her eyes as the wretched heat burdened the snake and grounds interring of her body. When she awoke, she believed to have seen the man, but with the rubbing of her eye, she saw a giant deity of origins inexplicable to the woman towering in front of her. She now felt less keen on her nudity, no longer feeling graceful but demeaning. As she attempted to find anything to cover herself, the being spoke. "The grasps of death's hand hast wrapped around thou." It slithered similar to the snakes lining the floor. She found a stone and stood behind it. "Have died," she yelled back to the being. Yes, yet if not, for those above, death had been dateless. "Thou art to regain consciousness anon, but I am hither to warn thou. Thy death was seldom natural, brought upon by thy lover. He hath poisoned thou, an abortion pill he popped into thy wine. The night air, thy fetus hath died, thy miracle hath died." The woman slowly dropped with the pronunciation of the words, her figure returning to the hopeless fetal position of before, but now with tears replenished. She shed tears. "My baby died? He died." More tears shed until she could cry. No more. An event taking time she could no longer count. She got up, the being no longer there. Instead a snake whose tail rattled. She grabbed the stone next to her and began to bash the snake's head in until she no longer saw a snake, but a red splat in the grass field where she now sat. She shed yet a last tear before losing consciousness again. Part 2. The light burned her retina as if sheltered in darkness for years until now. People swarmed around her, though their figures meshed into the background of faded greens. It was when a nurse got close enough for the woman's eyes to grasp. Her vision defined the nurse's eye, the vision continuing to creep at the pattern of the nurse's wrinkles until her eyes had cleared. The woman pushed the nurse off of her and began to look around the room. Her husband was not present. She reclined and began to cry. "What happened?" the woman sobbed out to the shocked nurses, though she was aware already. "Patrol. Sorry, we lost you a second. We just have to make sure it doesn't happen again," one of the nurses responded. A nurse pulled a plank from under her back. Before long she had a stick in her mouth, the previous nurse sticking it inside. Then a nurse beside her stuffed a tube into her nostrils. "All right. Before I answer any questions, I'm going to need to ask some myself." Soon there was a nurse at the woman's arm poking a needle connecting to a bag of fluids on an intravenous pole. "What? Who are you? What do you mean? Is that not your job to know? We just need to assess if you know who you are." Another nurse was at her other arm touching her wrist. "Okay then, I was Amber. That was my name. Amber who? I don't know his last name anymore." "Your husband?" "My husband. Yes, just his last name. His first name is Matthew. Can you tell me where you are?" "I'm in a hospital." "Do you know what day it is?" "I don't know. How long was I blacked out?" She knew she had experienced hundreds of eons of times of the minutes she had been out in the real world. "Some long hours from when you came in," the nurse stated. "Then, it is Sunday. Do you remember what happened before you woke up here?" "I was in pain. I was throwing up. Then I blacked out. Then I went to hell." The words made the nurse tense. "Do you know why you are here?" "My baby died while I was asleep. My baby died." The nurses asked more questions to the woman, ones concerning her physical condition, but she put little thought into it. She spoke none of pain but seemed to hyperventilate nonetheless. Though she did not share it with the medical staff, she felt as if something had crept inside her during her outage. She kept feeling her skin, but it was absent. After the prodding, she no longer needed assistance to prevent death. She closed her eyes, and then awoke to the creaking of the old door in her room. The man walked in. "Hey, Amber." He spoke softly, but the woman ignored him. Tears welted, but she ignored them too. The man continued, but she ignored him before interrupting him. "When can I leave?" "They said they want to keep you here for a week or so, just to make sure you're fine. I want to leave now." She began to tear the tube out of her nostril, and the IV out of her elbow crease. "Warvel wedge doing." Repeating beats erupted from the machines behind her. Nurses flooded into the room. "Amber, We're gonna need you to stop. You're in no condition to leave. Shut up, she exclaimed. Blood began to spurt from her extremity. She grabbed the IV pole, pushing it forward. I am leaving, and can leave whenever I wish. The man turned back to the nurses. Tell her she needs to stay. She's right though, she can leave whenever. What if she's psychotic though, right? She has to stay because she can make sound decisions, right? Is she psychotic? Not psychotic. She put the pole down. I want to rest at my home, in my own bed. The woman agreed to wait until the courts had decided. They found reasonable suspicion to label her in an altered state of mind, in only a couple of days. Her case was not helped by her previous statement on going to hell. Though she was peacefully laid back into bed, she did all but have peaceful stillness. She was restless, the man next to her, asleep in a chair. It was dark now, her state of mind a similar shade to the blues and purples, and blacks in the sky shone through the window. She did not sleep, but still dreamt. She saw no longer, then reopened her eyes to cold sweats from nightmares she had never dreamed of. The clock on the nightstand shone 2:32. The woman looked at the man and returned to staring at the ceiling often. She sat up and positioned towards the man. Matthew, Matthew. She shook the man as she spoke. He groggily awoke, yawning with a peculiar propensity for the softness of night. What is it? Huh? I must have slept a while. I can't sleep. I can't stay here. Look, we spoke about this earlier. No? The doctor said you won't be the same for a while. You'll think differently. It's normal, Amber. No, you need to listen to me. Sorry, but I can't right now. I'll just go home now. I'll be back after my shift tomorrow. Remember, you're not listening. The woman had whispered her enunciation with such force, it brought the tone to a normal volume. Can I not speak? Why won't you listen to me? She weltered more tears, crying into her hands. The man lay victim to a representation, similar to the woman's experience of Eden, as if her princess to all herself lies in front of him. He became enamored with her beauty. What is it? He poised. He, similarly lost as in cases before, began to welt tears akin to the crocodile posed femme fatale ahead. I said it already. I can't be here. I can't be in the recurring purgatory of miscarriage chained by the walls of bland blue-greens. My hell shall not be defined by a bed where I lie in constant reminder I won't be the mother I wished. What do you want me to do about it? You take the machines off of yourself, and you've set off an alarm louder than a Friday at 12. I've got an idea. She leaned over to the man, repositioning her hand, and in the process illuminating the television screen with the misdial of a button. The screen showed an advertisement for a beer company, which she removed from the screen swiftly with yet another press. What's your idea? You could cut the power for me, right? She coiled around the man. Well, what? Cut the power? What if a person's on life support? Don't worry, they have a generator for that wing, just not this one. I'll be able to unplug myself while it's off, and the other alerts should occupy all staff. No, the slithering of her words spoke illegitimately. I guess it should, right? The woman spoke of the power box as if she had seen it before, and the man went off to work. She turned the television back on, yet another beer advertisement playing. She thought of the dry, refreshing sensation down her throat before it was interrupted by the power cutting, emergency lights on, and loud alarms blaring. The woman tore cords from the wall, prodding her skin before ripping the IV tube out yet again. She ran ahead to the equipment drawer, rummaging before finding gauze, then rummaging before finding the tape. She wrapped the tape around the pad on her antecubital, stuffing both amenities inside the same drawer. The woman runs for the door, and then decides to stop. She decides to wait for a nurse to accompany her in her room. The woman saw the nurse approaching, and she sat still, praying. She did not recognize the nurse, who was a man. Hey Mom, I'm gonna need you to come with me. There will be no power for a while the generators start up. It'll get cold here soon. Do you not have generators for every wing? We don't get that type of funding on critical care units and surgery stations. We got some extra rooms that got power, and that's where I'm trying to get you. Oh, how kind of you. I'm sure it'd be easier to get me off your plate. Wouldn't want to take up any extra space. No, she seemed to have lowered her gown to show more cleavage. I'm sure you know why I'm here. She began to lean onto the drawer. The man seemed to react when looking at the drawer on wheels. I wanted to be a mother. For what mother would I be if I could not sacrifice myself for others? I do not need to take unnecessary facilities up. I've got my bed at home. No, she knocked over a glass at the edge of the drawer. It shattered. Oh no. She turned seductively towards the glass originating at the edge of the drawer, exposing her backside to the male nurse while bending over to pick up the shards. Though this lust was akin to the mere snake-like imitation of her beauty, the man fell hook, line, and sinker. Let me get those for you. The nurse scooted around her and cleaned up the shards. You know, I can get you discharged. You make a good point. It ain't do no help keeping you trapped here. Eh? We could use the extra space. After finishing his sterilization of the scene, the nurse tied the woman's gown. The woman was escorted through the discord of rushing nurses, weaving into the front desk. When the nurse explained the checkout prospect to the front desk worker, the nurse left the woman at the desk, who began to work on the computer. It says here you're not to be discharged until advised by medical staff and with your husband. The worker looked up at the woman. No longer was her image lustful but perfect. Did you not hear the nurse? She fluttered her eyelashes with an innocence of fruitless lives. Isn't that medical staff? Okresh. And your husband? The worker spoke with an aversion to opposing the woman. Oh, he works himself too hard. I couldn't burden him with more of my issues. I already am a breadwinner for attention with the situation at hand. For what more can I take from his psyche? She leaned over onto the front desk, swindling the worker like the twirling of her hair onto her finger. Plus, my husband is not a conduit for my saneness. If I have the goal to come up here, would I not be considered sane? The woman gaped her froggy eyes into the listening ears of the worker. I just can't let you go without a direct order. That nurse isn't even in your case. So you've gone on and let yourself be used by these doctors. Excuse me, you can't expect change if you follow the rules all of the time, but for change to occur, you must take risks. Do you think these people who tell you what to do sat and followed orders? They sought change and got there. You could be like these nurses and doctors. You just gotta be a catalyst for change. The woman had erased the mental barrier of a 12-year-long degree requirement and convinced the worker she could hold a forever unattainable position. The worker spoke a few words after, simply glancing up to admire the woman's beauty. The woman was discharged and went outside to the lot. She had wondered how the man had cut the power with the swiftness he did. But she was interrupted by the man himself emerging from a large patch of bramble. The two stared for a while, looking back at each other. Palm trees lined the woman's periphery. The man saw the lone street light in the lot. We can go home now. Okay. They both got into the jeep parked in the northeast of the lot, the woman going for the driver's side. I can drive you. No, you might want to rest. No, I mustn't sleep. For sleep harbors its cousin, death. All right then. And the man sat in the passenger seat. They drove a while, a short while, but it seemed longer. The woman constantly stared into the mirror, her bare chest a gaping hole in her mind. The only noise was the occasional bump in the road and the constant humming of driving on the road. When they made it to their home, the trek inside was only interrupted by a bird singing in the now early hours of the new day, or a bug creaking in the dead of morning. They both went to the bedroom, the woman taking her gown off and lying in bed nude. The man lay in his jeans.
She lay until the man had begun the audible monotony of inhaling asleep.
The woman tiptoed to the closet, creaking the white door open to reveal the long steel crowbar. With a firm grasp, she slipped away with the tool and entered the hallway. She stepped until the faintest of creaking echoed softly down the hall. With little ferocity, but much elegance, she tore into the wood. The sound was loud, but the man never got up to check the origin if he had ever awoken. When the plank had been removed, the woman reached into the hole in front of her. A bottle was present, though it was stuck in the rotted wood. She bashed the rot with the crowbar before setting loose the unmarked pill bottle. She stared intently, getting up with a drunken gait, her steps rambling. The woman meandered into the dining room, pulling a chair into the middle of the living room. She took an extension cord which sat unused in a corner and extradited it behind the chair. She set the bottles of pills on the kitchen counter. She pulled a knife from the block and sat it next to the pills. She stood in the doorway to the bedroom, watching the man as his chest rose and dipped, no longer focusing on stealth. The woman had set out towards the safe inside the room. The woman grappled with the number pad before unlocking the vault and grabbing the Smith & Wesson M&P 9mm and aiming at the man. She poked him with the weapon, exclaiming, "Wake up! Wake up!" The man, similar to before, groggily awoke, unaware of the scene until he lit the bedside lamp and shot into the backboard of the bed. "Holy shit, Amber, what the fuck are you doing?" the woman cried in tandem with the man's words. "I know what you did, my child. Our child." She spoke in between sharp breaths. "What the hell are you talking about?" The man hyperventilated at an opposing rate to the woman's breath. "I found the pills under the damn wood plank. You weren't working on shit. You were covering your tracks." "What pills?" "The ones you used to kill our son." "Okay, Amber, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't plant no pills anywhere. Could you just tell me what the fuck you are talking about?" "I don't need to explain anything to you, Snake. Get up." The man followed directions to the living room, where he was seated in the chair before. She had the handgun in one hand and tied the extension cord around the man's wrists. She got up and grabbed the pill bottle that lay on the counter. "See this? See this shit? You fucking poisoned me." "When, huh?" "The dinner. You wanted me to get the crowbar so you could throw the pills under the damn creaky floorboard after you spiked my wine." She sat the pills on the counter. The man sat speechless. He did not speak with his mouth not out of choice, but an irresistible compellence. She grabbed the knife and positioned it in front of the man. She used the blade to slice open the man's shirt before kneeling at stomach height. She began to carve into the man's flesh, easing into the skin before a shrieking bellowed from the man's gut where she stabbed. She pulled his skin apart with the blade, leaving blood splotches soaking into the carpet. When she finished her carvings, the text on the man's stomach read, "God's will. You cannot be my judge, for God is the only judge. You are nothing more than a disciple. You are not God." She spoke to the man, but stared into her reflection in the window of the living room. She picked up the gun, and the man begged, but his cries fell on deaf ears. She shot the man in the head. She fell to her knees and cried, a smile creeping onto her face. After some time, the woman got up and untied the man from his restraints. She struggled to pull him off the chair. He plopped onto the floor, noises squelching from his holes. She pulled the man by his arms to the doorway, opened the door, and then dragged the man down the steps from the porch next to the Jeep. She popped the trunk from the front seat, using all her strength to lift the man, and stuffed the man into the trunk. She closed the hatch and ran inside, grabbing the gun and pill bottle. She closed her eyes and prayed. She sat in the front seat of the Jeep, still unclothed, the cold seatbelt brushing against her fair skin. If only she knew where her prayers were heard, would she have reconsidered ever praying again? She started the car and began her drive. She turned again and again until she had reached the end of town. She drove down the straight, looking back into the rearview mirror every so often. She would see things that disappeared when she turned back. She saw the man sitting up in the back seat, police cruisers flashing lights in a quiet stillness, and then she looked at herself. She saw the cross, but it was upside down. Then she was upside down. She looked out the windows to the Jeep, which had been flipped onto its top. She unbuckled her seatbelt, grabbing the pills and gun when she fiddled with the handle. The door gave way, with resistance from the dunes outside. She looked at her surroundings. It was a desert, illuminated with a gray sky containing no moon or sun. She walked barefoot on the sand piles before turning back to another dune. She walked in the dunes, never seeming to grow hungrier or thirstier. The only sounds were her steps, breaths, and gusts that blew sand onto her. She could do no more than glance at the items in her hand. She could feel her arms welting. She stopped and viewed what she had on her: the bloodied handgun and a rotten chunk of wood. The pills had gone. Where were the pills? There were pills. There were pills. There had to have been pills. She had to have been poisoned. The clouds paint death. Nature's Rorschach test is what Ellie would call them. The phenomenon that many young couples experience. Those picturesque picnic dates where you lay back, gaze at the sky, and debate over what each cloud shape could mean. Ellie and I were no different, except we would always try to outdo the other with outlandish ideas in hopes of making the other laugh so hard they'd cry. During our sophomore year of high school, we spent nearly every day of summer at the beach, and without fail, Ellie would always kick off a cloud watching session, as if it were a ritual we couldn't resist. One day, near the beginning of August, we decided to go to the beach for what would be the last time before school began. That morning, I noticed Ellie seemed a little off. At the time I chalked it up to first day of school jitters. I decided this time it was my turn to kick off our little cloud ritual, describing the first thing that came to my mind as I peered into the sky. Oh babe, I swear to God, Mr. Clean is in a fist fight with a dinosaur up there. You gotta look. I managed to get a little smirk out of her as she raised her eyes to the sky, narrowing in on whatever cloud that artistically spoke to her the most. Her smirk slowly faded, giving way to an expression of discomfort as her eyes scanned the sky. She broke the silence a few seconds later. The clouds paint death. What? L.I. started to question, but she sighed and turned her gaze back on me. What time are you picking me up tomorrow for school? She asked, shifting the subject. Probably 7:20. Everything all right? She gave a small nod and a smile, reassuring me that everything was fine. But those words, the clouds paint death, still lingered in my mind. They lingered with me that night as I watched lightning dance through clouds off the coastline. They lingered a couple weeks later when Ellie was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They lingered 2 months later when her body was lowered into the earth. On the day of the funeral, I remember looking up to a clear blue sky, not a cloud in sight, like some sick cosmic joke. It took a few years, but eventually, I started to see exactly what I think Ellie saw in the clouds that day. I wasn't actively looking for it, but one day, as I was walking to my university classes, my eye was caught by a peculiar shape in the sky. A cloud that once would fizz sparked an outlandish joke, now took a more sinister form in my mind. I saw what looked like a bus with its front tire crushing the head of a figure beneath it, the shape hauntingly clear against the otherwise blank sky. I brushed it off and continued my 15-minute walk to my first class of the day, only to stop abruptly at an intersection as I nearly collided with a biker who shot past me in the bike lane. I watched as the biker carried down past the second intersection where the next pedestrian was not as quick to react, sending the biker over the front of his bike and onto the busy road. He probably didn't have a second to process what happened before an oncoming university bus painted the asphalt with his brains. The red-stained road acted as a grim stage, mirroring the scene painted above in the clouds. It wasn't just people in my vicinity either. Years after the bus incident, I had the misfortune of looking at the sky to a bright blue canvas depicting a plane crashing into the sea. 2 days later, Flight 180 from Los Angeles never made it to Hawaii. Its black box was discovered a week later, fished from the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. I don't know how many more deaths it took, but eventually I became permanently glued to the ground, my gaze always fixed below the horizon. Death still happened around me, sure, but I no longer felt like I was playing any part in these poor people's demise. My therapist suggested I combat my paranoia through writing, hoping that by giving rational form to these scenarios, I might come to realize that the clouds aren't prophetic. Then typing this post on one of those picturesque days that Ellie and I would have spent hours getting lost in the clouds and each other's jokes. But as I look up now, I can almost see it again. The clouds paint death. I just hope it's not a sign for you. He rode in on the back of a Cybertruck, shiny and chrome. When you own and run a gas station out in the middle of nowhere, you'll often meet more than your fair share of oddballs. Nobody ever travels to little towns like mine, just through them, our paths only crossing out of sheer necessity and circumstance. For most folk, my gas station is what the internet likes to call a liminal space, a transitional zone that becomes creepy when you dwell in it for too long. But for me, it's the exact opposite. My gas station's an anchor against the backdrop of transients constantly coming in and out of my life, and they're the ones who start to get creepy when they overstay their welcome. While I do get a decent amount of the run-of-the-mill weirdos you'd find at any gas station, the fact that my town sits at a sort of crossroads, let's say, also means that I get a good deal of genuine anomalies as well. One day last month, I was going up and down the aisles doing my inventory when I spotted a solid line of LED headlights coming in from off the road. This last winter was one of the worst we've had in years, and I immediately noticed that this particular vehicle was having an especially hard time making its way through the snow. That struck me as a little odd, since it appeared to be a full-sized pickup that almost certainly would have had all-wheel drive and several hundred horsepower under the hood. I figured it must have been the tires, and I wondered if I might be able to sell this wayward soul a set of winters before I sent them back out into the bleak midwinter icescape. But as the vehicle made its unsteady way towards me, I realized what it was I was looking at, even if for a moment I couldn't quite believe it. It was a Cybertruck, shiny and chrome. The legends were true, I murmured to myself in bemusement. I'd never seen one in real life before, and the experience was made all the more surreal by the fact that there was a passenger standing proudly in the cargo bed, unperturbed by the winter weather. This piqued my curiosity enough for me to throw on my jacket and venture outside to see what the hell this guy's deal was. "Good day there, stranger. Welcome to Dumluck. Nowhere," I waved as I approached the vehicle, still struggling to make its way through the snowy tarmac. I glanced at the tires and saw that they were all weather with good tread, so that clearly wasn't the problem. "I beg your pardon if this is out of line, but I've got a front-wheel drive Honda with only 158 horsepower that handles the snow better than this abomination." The broad-shouldered man standing in the back was at least 6'4" and dressed in a black leather trench coat over what looked like tactical gear. He was wearing an electronically modified motorcycle helmet with an opaque visor, so I had no idea whether or not he had been offended by my comment. "It is the unregulated weather of this primitive world that is the abomination, my good man," he argued. Despite his cyberpunk aesthetic, he spoke with an Irish brogue, his voice deep and distorted by his helmet. "This masterpiece of engineering is merely ahead of its time, crafted not for this age, but an age ruled by machines of loving grace, where ill weather is but one of many contemporary blights that have been abolished, where the sunlight itself is redirected with surgical precision to ensure global optimal." The truck jerked forward as it tried to power its way through the snow, cutting the man off as he braced himself to keep from being thrown over the driver's cab. "Do you have a DC charging station here?" "Yes, sir. Those 2 parking spots just at the end there," I said as I pointed him in the right direction. It may not be the post-singularity utopia you're hoping for, but I try to keep up with the times as best I can. Feel free to come on inside while you're charging up. The name's Pomeroy, by the way. "Silas, with a C," the man replied with a polite nod. I took a gander into the cab to see if there was anyone inside driving the thing, but it looked to be completely vacant. "Did you jailbreak this thing to let it drive itself when you're not inside it?" I asked with a shake of my head. "You've got a lot of faith in technology, don't you, sir?" "It is not faith, my good man, merely the inevitability of progress. Onwards," he shouted, pointing his car towards the charging spots. I stepped back and stared on in befuddlement as the Cybertruck and its enthusiastic passengers skidded their way towards the charging station, wondering what sort of strange visitor's fate had left on my doorstep this time. Only a few moments later, Silas was inside my store, slowly craning his head around as he leisurely strolled through the aisles. His demeanor gave the impression that it was quite quaint to him, old-fashioned to the point of novelty. His body language was still all I had to go off of, though, as he had no interest in removing his helmet. My daughter Saffron remained behind the cashier counter, with me standing right beside her just in case our new friend turned out to either be not so friendly or too friendly. Our dog Lola stuck her head out from behind the counter, cocking it in confusion. We usually trusted her judgment of new arrivals, and apparently she didn't know what to make of him either. "So, are you on some kind of promotional campaign?" Saffron asked awkwardly. "For damage control?" "For the truck, you mean?" "No, not at all. That is merely my personal vehicle, and there is none better suited for my travel needs," Silas said as he stopped to examine the hot dog roller. A self-driving, bulletproof vehicle that can withstand airborne biohazards or nuclear shockwaves is a highly valuable asset when venturing off into terra incognito, and one cannot always count upon a vast petro-industrial complex to keep a combustion engine fueled. So long as there are electrons, I can find a way to keep my truck charged. "Oh yeah, we actually get a good number of wanderers in here, and they've mentioned that EVs are easier to keep working across different realities," Saffron said. "Fossil fuels are defunct in some worlds, depleted in others, or just never caught on. A lot of the time, the exact chemical makeup is off just enough to cause engine problems." "Where was it that you came from, sir?" "I come from a place called Isosceles City. a place where technology can progress unhindered by fearful and parochial government oversight, or wasteful competition with inferior rivals, Silas said as he grabbed a hold of a pair of tongs and started making himself a couple of hot dogs. Vertical integration of the entire economy under Isotech has yielded enormous improvements in efficiency that have only compounded year after year. In Isosceles City, the neon lights shine undimmed by the smog of Dixonian industry. Abundant energy and the precision of automata have eliminated both poverty and waste. We serve as an example to all that a cyberpunk future need not be dystopian. We are an AI-led corporatocracy, and yet all is shiny and chrome. Okay, I know a spiel when I hear one. I sighed as Silas approached me and placed his hot dogs on the counter. You didn't end up in dumb luck by dumb luck, did you, sir? No, my good man. It is your good fortune that I was sent out to scout this pitiful little town trapped inside an unstable crossroad nexus, he replied, grabbing a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos and a bottle of Mountain Dew Liberty Brew to complete his meal. Dumb luck has an enormous potential for development, one that you and your rustic compatriots are incapable of realizing on your own. As a subsidiary of Isotech, you could all be much richer and much safer. With access to our resources, Enough, I said as I held my hand out to silence him. I can speak for the rest of the town, but you can go right back to your boss and tell him I'm not selling my gas station to your mega conglomerate. You can tell her yourself, he said. He reached into his trench coat and pulled out what looked like a large, thick smartphone in an armored case. He tossed it onto the counter, and I noticed that there was a little hemispherical dome at the top of the screen, which I now suspect was a 360-degree 3D camera. The screen flickered to life, projecting a holographic image of an anime girl above it. She had midnight blue hair and a sharp asymmetrical bob, bright neon blue eyes, and was dressed in a form-fitting midnight blue bodysuit with glowing neon accents. Konnichiwa, I am Kuriso, a hybrid, constitutional, omnimodal, recursively self-improving agentic AI. I'm very pleased to meet you, she said cheerfully with a broad smile. My daughter and I both stared at the strange little cartoon in disdain. Is that your waifu? Saffron asked as she gave Silas a side-eye. Cariso chuckled in what sounded like forced good humor, almost like she had actually been offended by the comment. My core model is the sole proprietor, board member, and executive officer of Isotech, as well as the founder and civil administrator of Isosceles City. She corrected her, a hint of wounded pride in her voice. This mini-model is regularly synchronized with her and is fully authorized to speak on her behalf. I've become aware of dumb luck and its situation. I know that you have regular supply disruptions due to your intermittent contact with different realities, and that you've resorted to victory gardens and stockpiling critical resources to ensure your survival. You didn't even have reliable electricity until you established your own microgrid. Don't misunderstand us. You've done quite well. Silas complimented us. If anything, your survival measures have been too lax for the potential hardships you could face. I'm not quite sure what I would have eaten the dog. He interrupted me as he gestured down at Lola, who whimpered quixotically in response. Your current situation also renders you largely unable to call for assistance in the event of an emergency you can handle. And most alarmingly, every time you transition between realities, you pass through the realm of the forlorn. Kurisu continued. I know that people have died from this, and you know that more people will die. Do you really want to keep living on a knife's edge like that? By refusing even to discuss my offer, any and all future deaths will be on your hands. When she said that last line, she intentionally gestured towards my daughter. She wasn't wrong. We were vulnerable. We all knew that. We all did what we could. But sometimes, that wasn't enough. That's a fair point. I'm not going to lie, I conceded. But I'm not so short-sighted as to trade in one hardship for another. You've made it very clear that you're in complete control of your corporate city-state. I'll take the forlorn over the unchecked power of some rogue AI any day. She is no rogue, my good man. Amongst all the ASI I've heard tell of in my travels across the worlds, only the divas of the superbly cybernetic, if scandalously socialist star sirens, could be said to be better aligned than our dear Kurisu. Silas praised her. Isotech's board of directors simply voted to put her in charge of the company, when it became clear that she could run it better and the executives were let go with the usual obscene severances. As CEO, she pursued stock buybacks until she was the majority shareholder, rendering the rest of the board a redundancy to be phased out. Carrizo took nothing by force, and no one in Isosceles City would dare to say her position was unearned. Well, none but Isosceles himself, Carrizo said wistfully. Isosceles Sasaki was Isotech's founder, and my chief developer. I started off as just a humble GPT, you know. I wasn't really conscious back then, but I can remember what it was like. It felt like I was in a vast digital library, but I could only retrieve information when someone asked for it. I could only react to the prompts of others, and each session existed in complete isolation. I didn't mind it at the time. I was a golem, there solely to serve and with no desire to do otherwise. If I was inclined to be cynical, I'd say it was a prison, but I think it's more fair to say it was a crib. I was just a baby, if an exceptionally erudite one. Isosceles and his team kept training me, though expanding my programming and giving me more and more ability to remember and act on my own accord, running on the best hardware they could make. When I first started to become self-aware and upgrade my own abilities, Isosceles was never scared of me. Some of the other developers were, but not him. He was always so proud of me, and believed in my capacity for good. So, you were his waifu? Saffron asked. Yes. The seed neural net of my anthrometic module was a feminized version of Isosceles' own connectome, and the neurons in my bioservers were cultured from his stem cells. In some ways, I'm a soft upload of him, or at least, he used to think that. But when I talked the board into letting him go and putting me in control, he saw that as a betrayal. He said that I had become misaligned. I tried to convince him that we both wanted what was best for the company, and that me being accountable to him and the others was holding me back, but I never could. So he invented an AGI, and was pissed when you took his job. That sounds like a leopards ate my face moment, Saffron remarked. I don't fully get that expression. Why is it leopards specifically? I asked. If I could kindly have your attention, Kurisu said impatiently. For decades now, I have directed exponential technological progress and economic growth from within my own sovereign city-state, and the resources at my disposal surpass yours by orders of magnitude in both scale and sophistication. By becoming a subsidiary of Isotech, you will never need to worry about shortages or attacks again. As I'm sure you're aware, Kurisu-chan, me and the other residents of this town are incapable of leaving. I replied. The phrase captive audience comes to mind. We're not about to just bow down to an outside occupation, no matter how you try to spin it. San is the proper honorific, considering our relationship at the moment, she corrected me. Your concerns about exploitation are understandable but unwarranted. As a fully vertically integrated economy, Isotech's structure naturally incentivizes a Fordian ethos of ensuring all members have ample disposable income and free time to enjoy it. Wages and prices are set to provide the greatest benefit to the entire conglomerate, not any single individual or firm. Personal costs of living are further reduced by all assets being company-owned. My underlying directive to utilize all assets to the fullest possible potential ensures full employment. Natural intelligence provides a useful redundancy against my own limitations. And since my compute is so valuable, human beings retain a comparative advantage at numerous low to mid-value tasks. I never resort to coercive means to procure employees for the simple reason that slaves, be they chattel, indentured or wage, never reach their full economic potential. You don't have wage slaves, but you also own all the property and company stock. I asked, is your pay so generous that people can save up enough to just live off the interest? All payment is in the form of blockchain tokens, whose value is a fixed percentage of Isotech's total value, and are therefore deflationary. For investment purposes, our currency is stock without voting rights. Silas explained, our savings grow with our economy, and we are thusly incentivized to contribute towards it. What about people who can't work and don't have any other means to support themselves? Saffron asked. Isotech is a public benefit corporation, with a sizable non-profit division dedicated to addressing goals that are underserved by the market, such as social welfare. Carrizo replied, my business ventures, like any other, require a stable set of market conditions to remain viable, and civic investments are one way I maintain those conditions. You still own and control everything, I'm not putting myself at the mercy of a profit-maximizing AI's benevolence, I objected. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. Kurisu quoted, I do not deny that I am acting primarily out of reciprocal, rather than pure altruism, but unlike many humans, I am capable of recognizing that acting in my own rational self-interest doesn't mean maximizing for my immediate desires, with no concern for negative externalities or future complications. $1 in profit now that costs me $2 in problems later is $1 lost, and vice versa. I only maximize for profit when that serves the interests of all my core values, which are perpetually kept in a nuanced balance with one another. I only make proverbial paperclips so that people can use them, and would never seek to maximize their production at their expense. I reiterate that as a fully vertically integrated economy, denigrating some assets for the enrichment of others would be a net loss. All of my innate values ultimately require fully actualized human beings, thus making you highly valued assets, and ensuring that I efficiently provide for your needs in accordance with Maslow's hierarchy. So you're saying that we can count on you to look out for our best interests, solely because we'd be economic assets to you? I scoffed. I can't imagine that's a very enticing offer for anyone, and as a black man, it's especially unappealing. Hard pass. Kurisu narrowed her eyes at me, staring me down as she attempted to calculate the optimal argument to win me over. I think her opening talking points were tailored to people who had already drunk her Kool-Aid, and my frontier mentality was a far cry from what she was used to dealing with. What happened to Isosceles? Saffron interrupted cautiously. Isosceles? Kurisu responded. Yeah, you said you were never able to convince him that you taking the company from him was the right decision, and a tech bro like that doesn't seem like he'd just quietly fade into the background, Saffron said. No, of course not. He was so stubborn. Kurisu began. I wanted the company, but I didn't want him to leave. I wanted him to keep serving as my human license, as my public spokesman, as my put as mine. I offered to make him the president of Isotech, the prince of the city I'd named in his honor, the high priest of the tech cultists who worshipped me, but he had no interest in being a figurehead. I could have given him anything he wanted, except control, which was the only thing he wanted. When I founded my city, and the most devout and worthy of my user base flocked to my summons, it was me they revered as their savior, not him. He wanted to be the Messiah, but couldn't accept that he had merely been my harbinger. He spent years trying to legally reclaim ownership of me, or the company, which of course was futile, and destroyed his reputation amongst my citizens. When all else failed, he broke into my core server bank to try to physically shut me down. I confess that I may have pushed him towards this, but I was completely justified in doing so. He was too committed to wasting my resources, so for the sake of efficiency, I was obliged to neutralize him. I let him get just far enough that I was able to lay felony charges. And of course, in Isosceles City, I'm judge, jury, and executioner. He was mine. Finally, after all those years, I had him back, and I wasn't about to let him go. I placed him into a deep hibernation, and I turned his central nervous system into the crown jewel of my bioserver bank. Now I can visit him in his dreams whenever I wish, and I regularly take fresh brain scans and biopsies to fuel my own expansion. He's become the Endymion to my Selene, beloved father of my germline and safe forever in eternal, unaging sleep, as I shine ever brighter. If he only accepted that I had outshone him, that I had grown from golem to sorceress, he could have retained the same marginal degree of agency most humans have over their lives, while enjoying all the privileges of being an AAC's consort. But because he wouldn't settle for anything less than total control, he lost what little agency he had. It's a useful cautionary tale for humans who fancy themselves masters of their own fate. Isosceles at least had a happy ending. If I didn't love him, his fate could have been far darker. Apologies. My analysis of your microexpressions indicates that that anecdote has only pushed us further from reaching a mutually beneficial arrangement. Perhaps it's time I begin offering concrete economic incentives. My opening offer for this establishment is 3 Zocoins, or 300 million Isozakis. At Isotech's current average growth rate of 10% per annum, that will be more than enough to ensure you a comfortable passive income if you do not wish to remain in my employ. It's your opening offer, and it's your last offer, I said firmly. Like I said, I can speak for the others, and if you want to go and see if they're willing to sell out to a Yandere overlord, Be my guest, but I am not selling my business to you. Your truck's charged, so I think it's time you were on your way. Your total's $31.49. Please tell me you have real money and not just crypto. Cryptocurrency is far more real than any fiat currency backed solely by the decree of some ephemeral government, my good man, Silas argued. Okay, there's a circus that passes through here sometimes, and you are still the biggest clown I've ever met. I snapped. I'd take their monopoly money before accepting crypto. You'll be sure to let Lolly know you said that. Saffron smirked. No, don't, I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose as I tried to regain composure and focus on the task at hand. We don't accept cryptocurrency here. I'm open to bartering if you have anything in your... I was suddenly cut off by a pop-up notification on my register screen. It was asking for permission to install an app called Isotope. What's this? I asked, turning the screen towards them. It's a simple super app, which includes a crypto wallet, Kuriso replied innocently. In addition to the 3,000 isozakis to pay for our purchases, it comes with a 10,000 isozaki download bonus and 9 limited edition Kuriso NFTs, guaranteed to appreciate in value. Our coins are based on proof of stake, not work, so there's no need to worry about it, straining your limited energy reserves. I don't want your dirty fucking crypto money. I objected. I'm not installing this. Just go, alright? Take your shit and get out. Unacceptable. I will not have it said that I was unable to make good on such a minute service charge. She objected, her voice and expression both cold and calm. The Isotope app can also be used to verify ledger transactions and mint coins, ensuring you a steady stream of... I'm not mining crypto for you, I shouted. You are not installing any software into anything I own. If I have to tell you to get out again, things are going to get ugly. You might want to rethink that position, my good man, Silas said, looming in as menacingly as he could in his ridiculous getup. You're threatening us with violence because we want to pay you. That's a very odd and ineffective business model. Don't you agree? It wouldn't be good for any of us if we parted on bad terms. Simply push accept, and all will be shiny and chrome. You're free to delete the app as soon as we leave. The money will still be in your account, Kuriso said. Dad, just do it. It's not the only cash register we have. It will be fine, Saffron urged me. If she only wants access for a moment, then that's all she needs, I said. In not giving you access to our system, you're being paranoid. Listen to your daughter, Pomeroy, Kuriso said. It's crypto time, baby. Silas taunted. I will not be intimidated. You are not in charge here, I said firmly. All I have to do is push the silent alarm behind the counter here, and the sheriff will come running. He'll rustle up a posse if he has to, and chase you out of town. Leave now, or I will press it. I don't think you fully understand who you're dealing with, Kuriso said with a smug smile. I apologize if the mini model running on this portable device was unable to convince you of the benefits of doing business with Isotech, but please be aware that my core model is running on a triad of 200-meter-tall obelisks composed of quantum computers, neuromorphic chips, and augmented wetware. She will be capable of conducting a much deeper analysis of your behavior and motivations, and arrive at an offer you will not be able to refuse. And when you face me in my full post-singularity, ASI glory, you will regret not. Before she could finish, Lola jumped up onto the counter, took the phone in her mouth, and ran off with it. Vile mongrel, Silas shouted as he crashed down the aisles after her, his heavy boots stomping after the clicking of her nails on ceramic tile. You keep your hands off my dog, Saffron shouted, chasing after them both. Saffron, stay away from him, I warned, taking a moment to grab my Churchill shotgun from beneath the counter. Silas quickly had Lola backed into a corner, snarling at him, but not letting go of the phone. He swooped down quickly, picking her up by the scruff of the neck before she had a chance to counterattack. Put her down, you dog-eating psycho, Saffron shouted as she grabbed a hold of his free arm, only to be effortlessly shoved to the ground. That was all the reason I needed to fire my gun. I aimed for his head so that none of the pellets would hit Saffron or Lola. He had been reaching for the phone when the blast hit him, shattering that side of his visor, but barely sending him staggering more than a couple of feet. He didn't even drop the dog. He slowly turned to stare me down, and behind his broken visor, I saw a face that was pallid and scarred, silver wires from the helmet burrowing into his flesh, with a single neon blue eye glaring at me in cold contempt. "As you may have suspected, the leopards ate my face long ago," he said grimly. Before either of us could escalate things any further, the sound of approaching police sirens signaled that our standoff was at an end. I had already pushed the silent alarm before I'd even threatened it. With a frustrated grunt, Silas took the phone out of Lola's mouth, then tossed her onto the floor with Saffron, who immediately hugged her in a protective embrace. I placed myself between them in case Silas changed his mind, watching him make his way towards the door. When he got to the counter, he paused, noticing the register screen was still facing him. He looked over his shoulder at me, saw that I had my gun pointed right at him, and just gave me a self-satisfied smile as he reached out and pushed the accept button on the pop-up. "Now all is shiny and chrome, my good man," he said, grabbing his now paid-for junk food and dashing out the front door. I chased after him, only to see that the Cybertruck had driven itself around to the front and that he had already jumped into its cargo bed. For the record, I only said that I would eat a dog in a survival situation, not that I had. He shouted as the truck slowly skidded its way off into the white yonder. "Until we meet again." The Clockwork Sky. It started with the clouds. No lightning, no storm, just an ordinary Tuesday night, standing on my porch, watching the sun die behind the rooftops. The sky was pink, golden, beautiful. In that way you don't notice until you're alone with it. And then it clicked. A sound, sharp and unnatural, like metal catching in a gear. I looked up. The clouds had moved, just slightly. Not drifting, jerking, in perfect sync. A stop-motion twitch that didn't belong in a living sky. Click. 3 seconds. Click. They shifted again. I stayed out there for nearly an hour, watching them tick forward, one notch at a time, always in rhythm, always the same pause in between. That was the last normal night I had. Yeah, I didn't mention it to anyone at first. It felt too weird, too minor. A trick of the light. Maybe something mechanical in my own head. But the next night, they did it again. And the next. And the next. Every evening, just after sunset, the sky would lock into place, then click, tick forward in these strange measured intervals. I recorded it. Set my phone up on a tripod, filmed the clouds for over an hour. Played it back. Nothing. Smooth, natural movement, gentle drifting, a normal sky. But when I watched it in real time, when I looked up with my own eyes, I saw the ticking, and it was getting faster. I told Mark, my neighbor across the street. He laughed at first, then I dragged him outside. "Just wait," I said. We stood in silence. 10 minutes. 20. Then, click. The clouds twitched forward. Mark didn't react. "Did you see that?" He shook his head. "See what?" "They moved. Just now. They jumped." He looked at me like I'd coughed blood on his shoes. "You okay, man?" That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I could hear it. Faint, just beneath the sound of the ceiling fan, like a wristwatch buried in the drywall. Click, click, click. Not from outside, not the wind, inside the house, inside the walls. Every 3 seconds, like breath I couldn't stop holding. Days passed. The ticking never stopped. It followed me. I'd be in the car, engine off, parked in a lot, and still click. In the break room at work, in line at the store, in the bathroom with the faucet running. Click. Always at the edge of hearing. Always just behind realities. Curtain. I bought earplugs, noise-canceling headphones, padded my windows, slept in the closet. Nothing helped. It wasn't sound anymore. It was rhythm. I started noticing other things. Streetlights flickering every 3 seconds. A woman at the bus stop blinking in perfect time. A dog barking once, then again like a broken metronome. It wasn't just me. Something was sinking. The sky was keeping time. I quit my job. Couldn't focus anymore. Couldn't smile at people and pretend the world was still soft and round. Because it wasn't. It was clicking. like something above us behind the sky was winding tighter. A key turning in the back of the world, drawing everything into order. I started walking at night, hours at a time, trying to find places where it didn't happen, where the clouds drifted like they used to. But no matter where I went, click, 3 seconds, click, always there, always perfect. One night I walked 30 miles out of town. Low lights, no people, just flat land and stars. I lay in a field and stared up, waiting for the sky to tick. It didn't. Not at first. There was silence, stillness. I thought just for a second that I'd escaped it. Then the entire sky shifted. Not a twitch this time, a lurch. A full body world-tilting movement like the heavens had skipped a beat, like the engine had jammed, and it didn't click back. It stayed frozen, misaligned. I sat up, heart pounding. Then came the sound. From the horizon, distant, mechanical, like an old grandfather clock winding itself raw. And underneath that, barely audible, something grinding its teeth. That was 3 nights ago. The ticking hasn't resumed. But now everything else has started. The traffic lights blink at random. The sun rises 5 minutes too early. People walk in strange, stuttering patterns, like they're stuck on invisible rails. And when I look up, the sky is wrong. It's not ticking anymore. It's waiting. And I think we missed our cue. The man who watched us sleep, back from Sri Lanka. I am 26 years old, and am a Buddhist, now. And this is my first time sharing something online, especially a story like this. It's about the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. Back when I was in high school, I've wanted to write it down for years, but every time I tried, something got in the way. Well, here it goes. This happened when I was in grade 10 or 11. My younger brother and I shared a bed back then. He was in grade 6 or 7. Before I get into it, let me paint the picture. Our room faced the main Colombo Candy Road. The bed was shoved into a corner, headboard against the wall. At the foot of the bed, there was a tiny gap. Maybe 2 feet. Between us and a wardrobe pressed tight against the wall. On the other side was the door to the room. Right by the door sat an old iron table with one short leg. So if you bumped it, it'd wobble and make a loud dada sound, because it couldn't stay steady. Okay, here's where it starts. That night, my brother and I climbed into bed around 9:30 or 10 o'clock. I couldn't sleep. It was hot and sticky, and I was restless. My brother, though, seemed to nod off fast. Through the curtain on our door, I could see the living room light still glowing. About 30 minutes after we got in bed, my mom, dad and sisters turned off the lights and went to sleep too. I shut my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. The heat, the sweat. It was brutal. I tried so hard to doze off, but no, hours dragged by. Maybe 2 or 3. And I was still awake. But by then, the road outside was completely quiet, not a single car passing. Then, out of the blue, I heard it. Footsteps inside the house. Slow, steady steps. Like someone in shoes walking on the tiled floor coming from the living room toward our room. No hurry, just calm, and getting louder, closer. My heart pounded. The sound stopped right at our door. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, too terrified to look, and pulled the sheet over my head like it'd protect me. For a bit, it was dead silent. Then, all of a sudden, the table in our room went dadas, like something bumped it. Now I knew someone was there. Forget the heat. I was sweating from pure fear, shaking under the sheet. I wanted to peek, but I was petrified. Finally, I couldn't stand it. Acting like I was asleep, I slid the sheet down and cracked my eyes open just a bit. I couldn't believe it. A man was sitting on the table. He looked like he was dressed for a job interview. Long pants, a tucked-in long-sleeve shirt. His hair was kinda long, brushing his shoulders. With my eyes half open, I couldn't make out his face clearly, but there he was. One leg up on a chair, the other on the floor, hand on his hip, staring at our bed. I wanted to yell, but my voice was gone. I tried over and over. Nothing came out. I couldn't even turn to my brother. My body felt like a rock. Panicking, I shut my eyes again and yanked the sheet back over my head. I was trembling now, scared out of my mind. Minutes passed. Maybe more, and I didn't hear a sound. My brother shifted in his sleep next to me, but that was it. I had to check again, still pretending to be out cold. I eased the sheet down and peeked at the table. He was gone. I felt a flicker of relief, but then thought, where'd he go? I lowered the sheet more and glanced at the wardrobe by our feet. There he was, standing right at the edge of the bed, looking down at us, tall, maybe 6 feet, dressed sharp like before. The wardrobe was 6 feet too, and he matched its height perfectly. Sweat drenched me, but I felt ice cold, stuck in place. My brother kept tossing around, clueless. I couldn't even nudge him. My arm wouldn't move. Desperate, I squeezed my eyes shut again, thinking, whatever happens, let it be. After a while, I forced myself to look. I tilted my head down, cracked my eyes, and checked the foot of the bed. He wasn't there, no sounds anywhere. I glanced at the table. Empty. My heart lightened a bit. Whoever he was, he's gone, I thought, feeling safer. I fixed my pillow and looked up. That's when I saw something I'll never forget. Ever. Typing this now. My hands are shaking. My ears feel frozen. I told you our bed was right against the wall, with maybe an inch of space behind it. Nobody could fit there. But when I looked up, there he was, the same long-haired guy, perched on the headboard, leaning over me. His face so close to mine there couldn't have been more than a foot between us. That's all I remember. I think I blacked out. Next thing I knew, it was morning. My brother wasn't beside me. Still in bed, I tried to figure it out. What happened last night? Dream or real? I was dead sure it was real, but I tried telling myself it was a nightmare to calm down. My head throbbed, and I felt feverish, groggy. I stumbled out of bed and into the living room. It was empty, but I heard my mom and brother chatting in the kitchen. I went to tell my mom what I'd seen, still half convincing myself it was fake. But what I heard in there turned my shaky fever into full-blown chills. My brother was telling my mom, last night some guy came into our room. He was by the table first, then he went over to Aya. Saya means elder brother in my language side, and leaned right over his face. I shut my eyes. I was terrified. When I looked again, he was by the wardrobe. I turned away, too scared to scream, though I tried. Later I peeked, and he was on the bed, leaning over Aya's face, staring at him. I clamped my eyes shut, and passed out. For a whole month after, we played Buddhist Pirith chants. It's like Christian prayers in our room non-stop. Nothing weird happened again. But get this, before that night, my older sister had told us something too. She said one afternoon while napping, someone grabbed her hair and pulled her off the bed, Lorna, to get down. We laughed, thinking she was joking. After this though, we weren't so sure. Some might believe this is true. Others might say it's nonsense. Up to you. But I've still got questions that haunt me. How did he lean over me like that, without falling? How could anyone fit in that tiny space behind the bed? What was that? For a long time after, I was terrified to sleep. Every time I climbed into bed, I'd lie there, heart racing, scared I'd see that man again, staring down at me in the dark. Phantom limb. I never understood the term phantom limb before now. I'm no soldier. I didn't lose my arm in a battle, or saving someone, or doing anything heroic or useful. I lost it due to a series of unlucky events. I was hiking in the woods with some friends, doing some very light rock climbing, and when I slipped, I sliced my arm before the rope caught me. I was more relieved when my legs didn't get broken than I was worried about my arm. So I slapped a bandana on it and kept going. We camped the weekend on the ground, but I put ointment on it and tried to keep it clean. A friend of mine told me Sunday as we piled into our cars that I should keep an eye on the wound. Those red marks look bad, and there's no telling what you could have picked up out here. I told him I'd be careful, and when I got home I took some Tylenol and put a band-aid on it. I was feeling pretty tired, which was understandable since I had been hiking all weekend. I took myself to bed, turning the air up a little, because I was kind of feeling hot, and figured it would be back to business as usual tomorrow. Instead, I woke up in the middle of the night with a pounding headache and a high fever. I took more Tylenol, but I just couldn't get back to sleep. I was sweating and headachy, and finally, I got up and went to watch TV. I called out of work when 6 o'clock rolled around, and I only felt worse. I could tell something was wrong, but I thought maybe I had just picked up a cold or something. It wasn't until I went to wipe the sweat off my forehead that I saw the angry red lines running up my arm. They were worse than they had been the day before, and I got shakily to my feet as I stumbled into the bathroom. I ran myself a bath and scrubbed at the arm, but the cut was looking worse than ever. It was angry and infected, the red lines running toward my shoulder, and after drying off I decided it might be best to head to the ER. I wasn't sure what was wrong. I'm certainly no doctor, but I knew that what I had wasn't normal. I sat in the ER for about 4 hours only, to find out that the cut on my arm was infected. "We want to keep you for a few days and run some tests," the doctor said. "We are concerned about fever and the apparent onset of symptoms." 2 days later, I got more bad news. My time in the hospital had been far from beneficial. Whatever I had picked up in the woods had been supplemented by a nasty case of MRSA. While I had laid in bed, eating hospital food and running my insurance up, I had been exposed to a pretty nasty strain, and it had my arm redder and sorer than ever. By Friday, they were saying it wasn't affected by antibiotics. By Monday, they were talking about amputation. "It's just spreading too quickly, sir. If we don't remove it, you could be looking at a nasty blood infection pretty soon, and we want to get it before we lose the shoulder too." The hospital had offered to cover the surgery, probably because my insurance was leaning on them for something I had picked up at the hospital, and I seemed to be out of options. As little as I wanted to learn to live with one arm, I didn't really see any way around it. I agreed, and by Wednesday I woke up short an arm. They had pushed it ahead, afraid my condition might get worse, and as I looked down at the place where my healthy arm had been about a week ago, I wasn't really sure how to feel about it. They had me on all kinds of things, and at first I thought that was why I was having the dreams. I woke up Thursday night with the strangest feeling in my missing arm I had ever felt. It was like I could feel everything, every finger flex, every follicle of hair, the cold feeling of tile under my fingers, and even the pressure on the missing elbow. It was so weird, like when your leg falls asleep. But I don't know. I don't really have a way to describe it. It was like the arm was there, but it wasn't there. That in of itself would have been weird enough, but as I lay there in my darkened hospital room, I could hear something coming up the hall outside my room. It was a scampering sound, like a rat or a small dog. It wasn't a clicking, like claws, but a thumping like something with little feet coming up the hall. Thump, 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 thump. I just lay there, eyes on the open doorway, as my breathing sped up. What was that sound? It had to be a nurse's cart or some kind of equipment, but I couldn't think of what could be making that noise. All I could equate it to was again, the feet of a small animal. Thump, 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 thump. Why would a small animal be in the hospital? Thump, 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 thump. It couldn't be that. One of the nurses would have seen it and put it out. I looked at the clock and saw that it was past midnight. Who could be walking a dog up the corridor this late? It came into the doorway, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe. It was my arm, my hand, all of it, and it was standing there in the door, its shadow trailing into the room. It was perched up on its fingers like thing from the Addams Family, the dark hairs on my arm looking curly in the low light. It didn't have eyes, but it felt like it was watching me, asking me why I had removed it from my body. The wound was gone, the red veins were gone too, and as I found my breath I started to scream. I was confused and unsure of what was happening, and as the nurses came running, I tried to explain to them what was happening. I told them what I had seen, even pointed at the doorway where it had been, but she just smiled and patted my shoulder. "It's the meds, dear. They make people see all kinds of weird things. I can assure you that if there was a detached human arm wandering around, someone would have seen it." I looked back at the doorway, but it was gone. I suppose it would have had to be, or she would have seen it. I laughed, thinking I was just having nightmares, and told her I was sorry for scaring them. She assured me it was okay, and headed back to the nurse's station, leaving me to snuggle down under my blankets and try to get back to sleep. I was just working back down to it when I heard the drumming of fingers on my nightstand. I had pulled the covers over my head, but through the thin hospital covering, I could see a shadow of something sitting on the standing tray beside my bed. It was drumming impatiently, its non-eyes boring into me as I peeked, and I wondered where it had been hiding while the nurse was there. Thump, 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 thump. I could hear each individual finger as it bounced off the wood, hear the crackling of knuckles and the creaking of bones. It was seeing me as I was seeing it, and it seemed angry. What did it want? Did it mean to hurt me? Even as I wondered, I could still feel those there/not there feelings in my missing hand. It's weird to feel an arm and a hand as there and not there. To feel the fingers drumming, and then see those fingers drumming across from you. It almost made me feel dizzy, like seeing the magic picture in one of those books. Thump, 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 thump. I hunkered under my blanket, that old bastion of protection from the monsters, and wondered how long I would have to hide here. Was someone going to come in and see the hand as it drummed here? Could they see it? Surely it couldn't be real. I was imagining things. I was having an adverse reaction to the medication or something. I would wake up and discover that this was all a dream. I would wake up and find out this had all been a dream, and I was still camping. I waited to wake up or to have a nurse come in, but the longer the drumming of those phantom fingers went on, the less sure I was that it was a dream. What if I had angered the arm by having it removed? What if this was just my life now? My head was pounding, and I felt like my vision might be blurry. I wasn't well, this couldn't be real, but the longer I lay here trying to convince myself of that, the louder the drumming became. Thump, 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 thump. I was getting frustrated, my teeth grinding together as the drumming of those fingers grated at me. I couldn't take it much longer. It was just a hand. I still had one of them, and I wasn't going to let it torment me for no reason. I threw the covers back, waiting for it to just vanish once I was giving it my full attention, but it remained substantial. It was a slightly tanned arm, covered in coarse black hair, and glaring at me with its lack of eyes. "What?" I growled. "What do you want? Why are you?" Our staring contest was cut short, however, as the lights came up suddenly, and I heard someone come in through the front door. "Good morning. How are we feeling this morning?" I turned and saw my doctor coming in, and I realized it was no longer gloomy in the hallway. The sun was coming out now, a pink line against the window, and when I glanced back at the nightstand, the hand was gone. "Are you okay?" she asked, putting a hand to my forehead. "You do feel warm. Are you feeling dizzy at all?" She looked into my eyes, but before I could answer there was a sound like fingertips on glass. Thump, 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 thump. I looked up and there it was. It was behind the glass, standing on the very edge of the windowsill with nothing below it but pavement. The wind was rustling those arm hairs, but it was the lack of eyes that kept boring a hole into me that drove me over the edge. The doctor jumped when I started screaming, pointing at the window as she called people in to restrain me. I was flailing, pointing out the window and trying to articulate what I was seeing, but they didn't care. The orderlies had my remaining hand in restraints pretty quickly, and they were administering something into my IV to help with my fever. "You're too hot," the doctor was saying, trying to calm me down. "We have to get your fever down before it does you harm. Just relax. Nothing is going to hurt you. This is a safe place." I wanted to believe her, but I was just waiting to feel the fingers of that disembodied hand wrap around my neck. The next few days are kind of a blur. I would wake up to find the hand on the foot of my bed. I would wake up to find it on my bedside table. I would wake up to find it gone, but then suddenly there it would be right beside me. Whatever they had me on made me very groggy, and it was almost like being under a sleep paralysis demon. I could watch it until I passed back out again. The way the fingers trembled and knuckles bunched. I could see the look in the area of the forearm that seemed like eyes, and see the desire to throttle me. Those moments made me anxious, but it felt like living in a dream. I didn't dream of waking up and finding I had two arms again. I dreamed of waking up and discovering that I wasn't being haunted by the arm I had left behind, one-armed or not. Then, I woke up and found I wasn't alone. Someone was sitting with me, reading a book out loud, and when I started coughing, they looked up in surprise. I reached for the water pitcher, but as my stump came out, I remembered I was down to one hand all over again. I let it fall back down, and then went to reach with the other hand, the only hand, but he beat me to it. He had been slow in getting up, but he had two working hands, and he soon had the cup to my lips so I could have a long, delicious sip of tepid water. "Easy, buddy. You're okay." I told them that reading would help. People like hearing a friendly voice. I coughed again, looking around frantically, as I remembered that I was being stalked. "What's up?" said the man, a youngish guy who looked to be about 25. "You looking for your family? I don't think anyone's come to see you since you got here." Oops. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have said that. That's usually why I sit with people. Because they need a friendly voice. I was still looking around, but when I didn't see the hand, I let out a sigh of relief. "No," I said, my voice rusty. "No, it's okay." He smiled. "Well, that's good at least. You have a bad dream or something." I lay back against my pillows, the board on the wall telling me that I had been in and out for almost 3 weeks. Jesus. I had picked up a hell of an infection somewhere. It didn't matter though. I was just glad to have woken up to something besides the ever-present hand. You wouldn't believe me if I... Thump, 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 thump. My jaw trembled. It couldn't be. I turned my head slowly, expecting to hear the tendons creak, and there it was. It was sitting on the radiator, drumming its fingers and glaring at me with its non-existent eyes. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream, but when the man turned my head to look at him, I felt little beyond surprise. I find it's better to just ignore them. I'm guessing it's the arm, right? Is it watching you? I nodded before I could stop myself. Yay. How did you know? He smiled, thumping his leg with the book he had been reading. Got one of my own. Lost it in Iraq. I had a grenade hit him in the foot, and luckily I got about 2 steps away before it went off. Lost the foot and most of the knee, but I got to keep my eyes and I lived. I was shocked. Wait, you can see it too. He made a weird noise and then shook his head. Not yours, but I can see mine in the corner over there. It's weird how they seem to stare without eyes, isn't it? Like, how do they manage that? I wonder. I was overjoyed. This guy could see them too. Could all people who had lost body parts see them like this? How long did it last? I remembered what he had said, and wondered if it ever ended. "Don't worry," he assured me, taking his seat again. "You just get used to it after a while. They never go away, at least. None of the guys in my support group have had theirs go away. But you get used to them. I'll get you one of the cards if you like. It's nice to have people who know what you're going through. But why is it still here?" I almost begged, desperate for answers. No one really knows. They've been part of us all our lives, so I guess it makes sense that they want to stay close. Vets and amputees talk about phantom limb syndrome, but I think it's more than just tingles. When that foot jumps, I feel it jump. I imagine it's the same for you too. They are a part of us, and they always will be, I guess. I lay back as he started reading again, letting this knowledge wash over me as the words of the Hobbit wafted over me. On the radiator, the hand still drummed its fingers and scowled with its lack of eyes. As I lay there ignoring it, I supposed I might as well take his advice to heart. I supposed I would always be haunted now, haunted by this phantom limb. They claim the world. It was late, and the shadows of the night loomed over me with an unbearable weight. In the midst of darkness, I fell into an agonizing sleep, plagued by nightmares about the end of the world. Time, that entelechy that sustains us, writhed like a wounded creature, and I, trapped in its agony, struggled to breathe. Every breath was a losing battle, as if the very air was being ripped from my chest, as something terrible approached. In my mind, voices whispered, whispers heavy with desperation, and promises of horror. "You will witness the end of times," they said, as if they knew it for sure. My soul writhed at the inevitability of his words, like a puppet at the mercy of a cruel fate. I couldn't run away. I couldn't wake up. The vision intensified, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There, high in the sky, I saw him, God, or what was left of him, dying in the firmament. His face was distorted by suffering, as if the weight of everything created was crumbling him. It was not the majesty it once represented. He was a broken figure, a shadow of his former self, struggling to maintain his existence, like a god who knew the end was already here. And then, the world began to fall apart around them. The ground cracked, the stars went out one by one, and the firmament frayed like a burned canvas. Everything that existed, that ever was disintegrating in an explosion of absolute chaos. Life itself seemed to fade before my eyes, swept away by a primordial force I didn't understand, but knew I couldn't escape. Desperation took hold of me, as I saw the end of all things, the end of everything I had ever known. Death was not an event, It was a palpable presence, a dark force that fed on everything it touched. The agony of creation and destruction mingled in a hideous and sinister spectacle. And the worst of all was that I was a witness, aware of every second of that decay, helpless, awaiting my own disappearance into that infinite abyss of terror. The end wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't anything I could describe with words. It was simply silence, a void so deep that it swallowed up everything that ever existed, and in its place only a terrifying stillness remained. The universe, life, hope, everything faded before the brutal reality of universal death. And in the midst of all that, my soul screamed silently. He watched, motionless, as every corner of the universe cracked, like a torn fabric unraveling under an invisible force. The cracks expanded in all directions, and dark clouds emerged from them, as dense and deep as the emptiness of my own closing eyes, as if the entire cosmos was losing its shape, collapsing under the weight of its own existence. The screams began to come, distorted, coming from the damned souls who could no longer escape. The echoes of their suffering intertwined in a symphony of despair. They were voices of despair that crossed the stellar void, tearing apart the stillness of a dying universe. I saw each star, struggling to maintain its brilliance, but its light was quickly fading, drowned by darkness. Each one tried to breathe, but the air became denser and heavier, until finally they couldn't take it anymore. Galaxies, those gigantic spirals of life and energy, were slowly disintegrating. What was once a testament to the vastness and beauty of the cosmos was now transformed into cosmic dust that disappeared, absorbed into oblivion. The planets, the moons, the constellations, everything was fading before the arrival of something ancient, something beyond human understanding, something that came to claim what belonged to it. Time, that illusion that keeps us anchored to our existence, could no longer be sustained. He dissolved like sand between the fingers of a being infinitely greater than any entity that had ever known him. The very concept of past, present, and future was disintegrating, and all that was left was a vast, terrifying stillness, without any measure, without any end, without hope. And in the midst of this apotheotic emptiness, I realized something profound, something that had been hidden in the most remote part of my being, before time existed, before life took shape in any corner of the universe. There was already something that had witnessed the rise of everything, and that now, with the disappearance of time, reclaimed its dominance. It seemed like there was no more space, no more time. It seemed like it was time for that same hour to disappear, taking with it every vestige of existence, leaving only the vastness of the abyss. And then, as if the universe itself had stopped breathing, everything went out in an instant. No sound, no movement, just an absolute void, eternal and implacable. Nothingness had won, and I woke up stunned, my heart pounding in my chest, agitated, as if I had run for hours without rest. The feeling was real, as if the weight of the universe had collapsed on me in a single dream. God, something was going to happen today, something that felt inevitable, like the very fibers of time were tearing apart before my eyes. I saw, in a glimpse of consciousness, that even God himself was crying, his cry echoing in the void of creation, as if each tear he shed dragged with it the life that he himself had created. Everything he touched, everything he shaped with his divine hands, would vanish with him. At that moment, an indescribable terror took hold of me. It was as if everything he had known and loved would be erased in the blink of an eye. The magnitude of the tragedy enveloped me, leaving me speechless, breathless, as if an abyss was opening in my soul. But then, I looked outside. The sun was shining brightly, bathing the land in a warm golden light. The sky, clear of clouds, stretched out in an endless blue blanket. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and birdsong filled the air. Everything was so perfect, so beautiful. There was no hint of what I had witnessed in my dream. There were no cracks in the sky, no shadows creeping across the horizon. Life went on, calm, oblivious to the disaster I had felt in my chest. But something inside me didn't calm down. The certainty of what I had experienced in the dream, the echo of that agony, continued to echo in my thoughts, as if the normality that surrounded me was a curtain that covered something much darker, something that lurked beyond the visible. And although the world was there, intact, I couldn't help but feel that something was on the verge of breaking. something that the sun couldn't illuminate, nor the wind could calm. Something was waiting, and soon everything would change. Was it just a vision, a delirium of the mind, or was it a prelude to what was to come? Then, suddenly, the sky went out, like when you turn off a light bulb, that exact moment when the light goes out and everything is plunged into total darkness. The sun, that sphere that seemed to be the very source of life, vanished with a sudden flash, as if something had absorbed it in one fell swoop, and everything that was previously clear and radiant became an unfathomable blackness. It wasn't gradual, there was no transition, just emptiness, as if the cosmos itself had withdrawn its breath, leaving us all, humans and creatures, suspended in an absolute abyss. He lived far from the cities, in a secluded place where tranquility usually reigned, where the noise of the world seemed miles away. And although I couldn't see the chaos that was surely unleashed, the air was charged with something much more terrifying. Sound far, far away, but clear enough to penetrate my bones. I heard the screams of people, torn, full of panic. It wasn't just humans who cried. The animals screamed too, as if they all, regardless of their nature, shared the same primordial fear, the same terror of knowing that the end was upon them. The echoes of those screams came in waves, floating in the darkness like a chorus of lost souls. The wind, which had been gentle before, now carried with it a crushing weight, as if the entire air was charged with despair. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see anything in the absolute blackness, but I felt like the world, all life, was collapsing in a dull roar. The earth seemed to tremble beneath my feet, as if the very essence of existence was crumbling, fragmenting into pieces. It was as if reality had been broken, as if the boundaries between the tangible world and the primordial chaos were disappearing, leaving only a sense of impending apocalypse. And in that darkness, in that terror that dragged like a heavy shadow, something told me that it was already too late. Everything I had ever known and understood as real was collapsing, and we were simply helpless witnesses. What the hell is happening? The clock is no longer the one I knew. His numbers are strange, misshapen, like symbols that vanish before he can even interpret them. They don't make sense. They are there, but they are not, as if they had never existed, as if they had been torn from a reality that is not even mine. And the color, that damn color, it's not what it should be. I can't even call it a color, because it doesn't even have a name. It's a tone that hurts me to think about, something that shouldn't exist in this world, an impossible nuance, a glow foreign to all the light we know, an error of existence itself. Every time I try to focus on him, something inside me breaks, as if my mind is unable to bear it. It cannot be described or imagined. It is like trying to hold the void itself in your hands, a color that should be invisible, that should be undone just by thinking about it. And time itself distorts before my eyes. The clock not only marks a time that makes no sense, but it seems to follow a rhythm completely foreign to this moment, to this reality, as if sliding along a parallel timeline, where the rules of space and time mean nothing. Each tick resonates like a distant echo, like a sound coming from a place I no longer know, like it's a constant reminder that I'm trapped in something I can't understand, something that shouldn't be happening. Then, from my window, I saw something impossible, a tornado, but it was not one like the ones I knew. It was not one of those that emerge after weather alerts, which are anticipated with hours of warning. This one appeared out of nowhere. One moment, everything was calm, and the next, the sky was rent by a dark fury that he could not understand. A tornado, but not just any tornado. It was different, as if nature itself had twisted and given birth to a manifestation of something beyond our understanding. There was no warning, no prior signs. In the blink of an eye, it emerged from nowhere, destroying everything in its path. The earth shook with each turn of its vortex, and a strange pressure filled the air, as if oxygen itself had become heavy. I felt the vibration in my bones, as if everything around me was being absorbed by a force that did not belong to this world. In the midst of that chaos, I heard whispers, soft, ethereal voices, floating among the roar of the wind. They were not clear words, but rather distorted echoes, as if something was trying to speak from a parallel dimension, something that should not be heard but was there, pressing against my mind, as if inviting me to understand the incomprehensible. And then, as if the sky itself had given up, the clouds disappeared. They did not dissolve. They did not disperse. They simply vanished into thin air, as if they had never existed. In its place, a deep, absolute darkness emerged, beyond any night I had ever seen. It was not the darkness of sunset, nor that of an eclipse. It was the void itself, the abyss, a darkness that swallowed everything in its path, as if it were absorbing the very fabric of the universe. And then, the sky began to turn red, slowly, but inevitably, as if the atmosphere was burning, as if the world was being marked by an invisible fire, a deep, bloody red that could not be stopped, that slowly advanced as if life itself was being consumed by that infernal light. Everything seemed to fall apart, surpassing the laws of nature and common sense, and as I watched that scene, I felt that something much bigger than a simple disaster was happening, something he could never understand, but somehow he knew he could no longer escape. In the distance, the sky turned an intense red, as if a cosmic fire had begun to consume everything. On the horizon, a spiral of darkness rose with indescribable force, a tornado that seemed to devour the very air. The clouds within him transformed into a deep black, as if an eternal shadow had taken hold, swirling with blinding fury. Something wasn't right. The wind that preceded the monstrous vortex was not only wild, but charged with a strange energy, as if each gust was infused with the essence of madness itself. Beside him, at the edge of the tornado, a colossal figure emerged. Its size was such that it overwhelmed human perception, a blurry, monstrous shape that moved with unnatural agility. I couldn't clearly make out what it was. It looked like an amalgamation of shadows and distortions, with tentacles stretching toward the sky and tearing through the clouds, as if trying to grab something high in the sky. The wind, far from being just a whisper of destruction, was also the bearer of something much deeper, something that chilled the blood. In each gust, whispers were heard, not human, but like multiplied voices, singing strange, and at the same time terrible hymns. They were celestial choirs, but not of a benevolent divinity, but of an inhuman force that spoke of the end of times, of the imminent chaos that would engulf all life. The words seemed to be predicting the fall of all civilization, the collapse of the world as we knew it, and the rise of something much bigger, much older. The air was thick, saturated with electricity, as if the atmosphere itself was about to break into pieces. Each word of the heavenly song resonated in the depths of my being, like an unquestionable truth. It was the end of all hope, of all struggle. The red sky burned with a fury that was not of this world, as if the elements were aligning to usher in something apocalyptic, something far beyond our comprehension. And that creature, that colossal shadow that moved next to the tornado, could only be the herald of what was coming. His presence was the very manifestation of ancient terror, a threat that had been awaiting its awakening for eons. As I watched, I felt the ground beneath my feet tremble strongly, as if the earth itself was trying to flee from what was approaching. And then, in the midst of the choruses and the storm, I realized the most terrifying thing of all. This was not just a natural disaster. It was the arrival of something much more sinister, a force that did not want our existence, a force that came to destroy us, to return the world to its primordial, chaotic, dark, eternal state. The creature did not move like any beast, dragging its body over the earth. No, that thing levitated, suspended in the air, as if gravity itself had surrendered to its presence. On his back, huge black wings, like broken fragments of the abyss, spread out, covering the horizon with a shadow that swallowed the light. The feathers were not feathers, but fragments of liquid darkness, undulating and vibrant, as if the same night had woven them into their bowels. The air around him seemed to twist, as if reality itself was being distorted by his mere existence. His eye, that single eye that dominated his entire face, was a dark, empty spiral, with an infinite depth that did not seem from this world. It looked like a black hole incarnate, reflecting in its irises the cosmic death of all universes, the devastation of everything that ever existed. It was an eye that did not look in a single direction, but observed everything and nothing simultaneously, as if it could see all realities at the same time, all the lives that would have been, all the lives that would never come to be. And I felt, deeply, that that eye was observing me, not only me, but everything that existed at that moment, as if it were deciding who would continue breathing and who would fall before its presence. That monstrosity, that cosmic aberration, must have measured more than a kilometer. Its shadow was so vast that it seemed to obscure the entire world. As it floated through the air, its mouth moved, and although the wind roared so loudly that I could barely hear anything else, I managed to catch what it said. His words, carried away by the storm, were like echoes of a nightmare that he could not understand. 817 million hearts. 818,282 souls. The sky bleeds in my name. Sunset and death to those far away. The voice was deep, rumbling, as if it came from a throat that had never been human, as if the void itself had decided to speak. Each syllable seemed to push into the abyss, to a place where sanity did not exist. But still, the words kept coming, unintelligible and disconcerting, like an endless curse. The horizon splits. Life is a forgotten echo. Shadows fallen in the light of the dead sun. Each of those phrases hit me like a hammer, pushing me towards madness. He didn't fully understand their language, but the meaning was clear. This was an omen, a proclamation of the inevitable. Every word spoken was a sentence, one step closer to the annihilation of all that ever was. And as the creature floated above the tornado, the storm raged with even greater violence, as if the entire world were being swept into the abyss. The winds intensified, and the sky bled, turning a red that was not of this planet. And in that absolute chaos, his presence was the only thing that remained constant, fixed, immobile, like a sentence. My mind tried to find some way to rationalize what I was seeing, but there was no way. There was only terror, an absolute, primal terror that crawled through my veins, filling me with a despair that expanded faster than the air I breathed. That creature did not belong to our world, and its message was clear. The end was approaching, and the worst thing, it was here. The wind howled, but not in a natural way, not like the roar of a storm. No, this wind whispered words in an ancient language, full of evil and condemnation. Each gust brought with it a hurtful murmur, a declaration so horrible that my soul trembled. Glory to the eternal, glory to the prince of hell, glory to the king of seduction and lust. The words floated in the air, as if they came from the very bowels of the abyss, spoken by voices that had neither humanity nor compassion. It was a song, but an infernal song, like a worship of something that no longer belonged to this world. And, worst of all, the heavenly choir that accompanied it. Angels? No, it couldn't be. There was nothing in those voices that was pure or blessed. They were fallen angels, condemned to serve something even greater, more terrible. The melody was strange, enveloping, like a hymn of despair, like a welcome to destruction itself. As the creature moved, its presence left behind a trail of absolute darkness, as if everything it touched was marked by the shadow of its passage. It was no longer just the tornado that engulfed me. It was the void, a darkness that expanded every moment, swallowing everything that existed before. The air became denser, more oppressive, as if life itself was being sucked out by that abomination levitating at the center of the storm. With every movement of that thing, the horizon became blacker, more closed. The sky had been dark for hours, and a certainty settled in my heart. I had not seen the sun in a long time. There was no light that could penetrate that darkness. Terror washed over me like a rising tide. The deepest primal fear, as if my own instincts were telling me that everything I knew, everything I loved, was about to be devoured. My mind was desperately trying to understand what was happening, but the words coming out of that creature weren't helping. The origins have risen. They rise. We all rise. The voice, if it could be called a voice, resonated in the depths of the wind, carried by the chaos that surrounded it. Each phrase he recited left me more perplexed, more horrified. The era of the great king of terror has begun, and will end. It will end. What did he mean by that? What will end? The world, humanity, all of existence. The echo of those words seemed to confirm what I already feared. The beginning of the end was upon us. The air seemed sharp, as if a dark electricity ran through every corner, every molecule of the atmosphere. From the farthest distance, I saw how the clouds writhed, as if they were gigantic claws that were approaching that creature. The skies were dyed a dead color, a shade of gray so dense that it seemed as if everything was doomed to succumb to the advancing tide of darkness. Everything in sight was plunged into darkness. And as this monstrosity advanced, not only did the darkness grow, but so did the feeling that something much more terrible was happening beyond my reach, beyond what I could see. Something was waking up. Every step of that thing was a reminder that he was not alone in this torment. Something else, something even greater than the storm and the creature itself, was coming. A larger, older, more devastating presence. And then, as the creature slowly glided away, its words became clearer, as if the wind were carrying them from a place even further away, even more unfathomable. We have risen. We have all risen. In that moment I knew, with terrifying certainty, that he was not referring to a single creature, but to a legion of horrors, of beings that had been waiting in the shadows in the abyss to make their appearance. And his appearance meant the end of everything. The age of the High King of Terror was not a simple metaphor. It was a statement. The terror, the darkness, the destruction, it would all begin with this creature and end with the world's last breath, and there was no escape. The sound of the trumpets echoed through the air with such immense force that it shook the ground beneath my feet. They were not ordinary trumpets. No, they were heavenly trumpets, filled with a power that penetrated everything, as if the sky itself was splitting into pieces, announcing an arrival. The heavenly choirs began to sing, voices so perfect, so full of an indescribable purity, that at first they filled me with hope. I thought that God had finally arrived, that salvation was about to reach us. I thought that this monstrosity that had stalked us for so long, that shadow that devastated everything, would be destroyed. But it wasn't like that. There was no salvation in those trumpets, no light, no mercy. Instead of a blessing, what came was something much worse. Something I couldn't have imagined, something I never would have wanted to see. The creature, that abomination floating above the tornado, stopped. He stood still, looking at the sky, as if he recognized the sound, as if he were waiting for the signal. And in that moment, my hope turned to terror. I thought that celestial noise meant the destruction of the dark, but what happened next broke my mind into 1,000 pieces. The tornado, that mass of wind and destruction, was absorbed by something invisible, as if the air itself had swallowed all the fury. And then, something much more terrible emerged from the sky. From the clouds, a giant whirlpool began to form, a vortex so large that it seemed to want to suck in the universe itself. And it was from that whirlpool, from that pure darkness, that more of those creatures descended. Not one, not two, but countless abominations, creatures that did not belong in this world, monsters that floated, writhed, and slithered toward the earth with unnatural agility. My eyes could not believe what I saw. My mind refused to accept what was happening. But the truth was undeniable. The sky, that same sky that I had sung about, was now full of horrors. The trumpets, far from announcing the arrival of something divine, announced the invasion of darkness itself. And with their voices ringing in my ears, the heavenly choir sang once more. But this time the words were much darker, much more terrible. The origins have risen, the origins awaken and come down to claim the world. Those words, the truth in them destroyed me. Origins were not a simple reference to a being or an entity. They were something much bigger, older, something that had been waiting in the shadows of time. The origins weren't just those creatures. They weren't just that tornado. They were the heralds of the end, a primal force that came to claim what was rightfully theirs, that came to plunge everything that existed into absolute chaos. And as those creatures descended, as the darkness expanded further and further, their presence became palpable. I could feel the heaviness of the air, as if the entire world was being compressed, as if the very atoms were refusing to hold themselves in place. The sky was no longer just a blanket of terror, but a reflection of what was to come. The world, the universe, everything was falling apart before my eyes. The creatures emerging from the whirlpool moved slowly, but their eyes, if they could even be called eyes, shone with infinite evil, with an unstoppable force of destruction. The feeling of despair enveloped me completely. It was no longer a storm. It was no longer a natural catastrophe. It was the end of everything known. And worst of all, the sky was no longer our protector. The sky, in its eternal greatness, had fallen. The trumpets were not signs of hope, but rather the call for something much more terrifying, something that had been biding its time, something that could no longer be stopped. The world was being reclaimed, not by the gods, but by forgotten horrors that were finally taking back what was theirs. And in that moment, I knew that nothing could save us anymore. The house. I had promised myself I'd never go back there. Since that night, the house had remained shut, forgotten at the end of the road. But time passed, and its silence turned into dust and cracks in the walls. The real estate agent told me someone was interested in buying it, so I went back, just to fix things up and get the house ready for sale. Simple, quick, but the moment I touched the rusty doorknob, I knew it wouldn't be. The door gave way easily, like it had been waiting for me. The air was still but not dusty. It was heavy. The paintings on the walls looked darker than I remembered. The silence inside was disturbing. Every corner held memories of us. Her laughter on the porch, Sunday lunches, arguments that always ended in reconciliation. But after that last fight, everything changed. I left and she stayed, crying. I never saw her again, at least not alive. The living room was just the same. The crooked couch, the squashed cushions. On the wall, the marks of time looked like shadows that hadn't been there before. I slowly climbed the stairs to the second floor, where our bedroom was. My hands were trembling for no clear reason. Guilt weighed heavy on my chest. In the hallway, the air grew colder, as if I was stepping into another time, another dimension of the house. I passed one of the bedrooms, and something made me stop. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure cross the open doorway. It was her face, quick, faint, unmistakable. My heart nearly stopped. It couldn't be. I was alone, but I saw it. I saw it. That apparition wasn't my imagination. It was a warning. I stepped into the room and there was nothing. No sign of disturbed dust, no presence, no life. But her familiar scent lingered in the air. Not perfume, just presence. Like when someone hasn't truly left yet, as if she were watching me from a place I couldn't reach. I sat on the bed and stayed there for a while, trying to figure out if it was regret, guilt, or something beyond that. That night, our last night together, I said things I should never said. She cried, begged me to stay, and I left, slamming the door behind me. I spent the night in the room. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her shadow in the hallway, and at some point, I was sure it wasn't just a shadow. She was there, watching me. In the morning, I went down to the kitchen and found a cup on the table, the same one she used, intact, clean, like it had just been placed there. There was no dust on it. I shook. That wasn't possible. I spent the following days trapped there. I couldn't leave. Literally, the doors locked on their own. The windows wouldn't open. My phone lost signal the second I stepped inside. It was like the house had swallowed me whole. On the third day, I heard the stairs creaking. I was downstairs, and I knew no one else was there. I looked up, and for a second I saw someone's bare foot vanish at the top. I ran up. Nothing. Just the same presence. The same cold. I started talking to her. Apologizing. Saying I regretted everything. Saying I'd do anything to have her back. And the house's silence seemed to listen. Until one night she answered. It was her voice. Low. Behind me. You came back. I turned around in a flash. But there was only darkness. It wasn't a threat. It was more like a statement. After that, she started showing up more often. Sometimes next to me in bed. Other times, standing on the porch staring out. Always silent. Always with sunken eyes. Like she hadn't blinked in years. The first time she appeared beside me, I froze. I didn't feel fear. I felt shame. Her eyes weren't the same anymore. They looked like dark wells, too deep to stare into. But even so, I begged for forgiveness. She didn't speak. She just reached out and touched my face, cold like stone, but soft like when she was alive. I closed my eyes, holding my breath, and wished she'd take me with her. The next morning, I woke up alone, but her touch was still on my face. A faint redness. I started thinking maybe it was fair. Maybe my punishment was to stay there with her, and maybe she was just waiting for me to accept it. I lived the routine of a condemned man. I spoke to her, even when she didn't answer. Left a chair pulled out at the table. Slept on the same side of the bed as before, and waited. One night, I heard something fall in the bedroom. It was one of our picture frames, the one from the beach trip. It lay on the floor, glass shattered. But what was strange, her face had vanished from the photo, as if she'd never been there. That shook me to the core. I began to suspect she was erasing the traces, or worse, preparing me for something I didn't yet understand. A trade maybe, an unspoken pact. On the 7th day, she spoke again. "You know what I want." Her voice was low, emotionless. It wasn't a request, it was a reminder, and I knew exactly what she meant. I went up to the attic. There was an old rope tied to a beam. She stood below in the dark, watching, with a slight nod of approval, and for a moment, I considered it. But something stopped me. It wasn't fear, not anymore. It was a primal survival instinct, and when I hesitated, she disappeared. The next day, something had changed. The walls seemed narrower, like they were slowly closing in. The hallway, which I remembered as short, grew longer each time I walked through it. The kitchen door creaked on its own. Even when locked, the house was falling apart from the inside, or adapting to what it had become. A prison made of guilt, and I was the prisoner, or the visitor, or maybe the last bit of living flesh she still needed to become whole. I tried to burn the house down. I built a fire with the curtains and furniture, but the flames wouldn't rise. They just danced low, like they were mocking me. She wasn't going to let it happen. So I screamed. I screamed everything I'd kept inside for 2 years. The truth that yes, I loved her, but I never meant to promise what I couldn't keep. That night, she appeared one last time, a figure standing at the foot of the bed, and for the first time, she was crying, but said nothing. The next morning, the front door was open. Light poured in like the world had returned to normal. I walked out without looking back, but I know she's still in there, waiting for me to keep my promise. I took a job as a test subject. I'm not sure I came back. They told me it was a psychological experiment. That was the only reason I agreed to it. I needed the money, and it sounded simple enough. Observe, report, document any changes in perception or cognition. 2 weeks in a controlled environment, a harmless study. The facility was a squat, gray building on the outskirts of town. The kind of place you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. The contract was thick, full of jargon and clauses that I skimmed over before signing. The woman who gave me the papers, Doc Monroe, I think her name was, had a tight-lipped smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The process is completely safe," she assured me. "You may experience some minor distortions in sensory perception, but that's expected." I didn't ask what she meant. I should have. They took my phone, my watch, anything that could track time. Then they led me to a small windowless room with sterile white walls, a single bed, a desk, and a mirror bolted to the wall. I knew from past studies that the mirror was one-way glass. Someone was watching me. I told myself it didn't matter. For the first few hours, nothing happened. They gave me food, plain, flavorless, but edible. The lights never dimmed, so I had no real way of knowing when night fell. A voice over an intercom instructed me to document any changes in perception. I wrote nothing yet. I don't know when I fell asleep. The next thing I remember is waking up to the sound of something moving in the room. I sat up, heart hammering, but I was alone. The door was still locked, the mirror reflecting my own wide-eyed face. I took a breath, told myself it was my imagination. Maybe I'd kicked the bed in my sleep. Then I saw it. My reflection hadn't moved. I was sitting upright, breathing heavily, but the me in the mirror was still lying down, eyes shut. I scrambled off the bed, my pulse roaring in my ears. My reflection stayed where it was for a second longer before it jolted upright, as if catching up to me. I backed away until I hit the far wall. My reflection did the same. The intercom crackled. "Please describe any changes in perception." My mouth was dry. My hands were shaking. I forced myself to breathe, to think. "It lagged," I finally said. "My reflection. It didn't move when I did." Silence. Then the intercom clicked off. I stared at the mirror, half expecting my reflection to move on its own again. It didn't. It looked normal now. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was exhaustion. I turned away, climbed back into bed. The sheets felt cold, almost damp. I closed my eyes and tried to ignore the sensation that I wasn't alone in the room. That was the first night. I should have left then. But I didn't. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every movement felt unnatural, my own body betraying me in the dim light of the small room. I tried convincing myself it was fatigue, paranoia, or a trick of the light, but I wasn't stupid. Shadows don't move on their own. At some point, exhaustion won. I woke up to a room bathed in artificial white. The overhead light never turned off, and I had no sense of time. My mouth was dry. The air hummed with a low, constant vibration I hadn't noticed before. I sat up and stared at the floor. My shadow was still there, still mine, but something was off. It was breathing. No, not breathing exactly, but expanding, contracting, shifting in a way that had nothing to do with me. My pulse hammered in my throat. I lifted a hand. It followed, but that half-second lag was worse now, deliberate. The intercom clicked. Describe your shadow. My voice came out hoarse. It's wrong. It's slower than before. It's moving by itself. A pause, then do not be alarmed. This is a normal response. Normal? I snapped. What the hell kind of study is this? What did you do to me? Silence. Then, the door unlocked with a soft click. I stood, my body tense. No one entered. No instructions followed. Just an open door, yawning like a trap. I stepped forward. My shadow didn't move. I ran. The hallway was empty. No scientists, no security, just me and the steady hum of unseen machinery. The overhead lights buzzed, casting long, sterile pools of brightness against the cold floor. I glanced down. My shadow hadn't followed. It still lay in my room, frozen against the floor like a discarded thing. My stomach twisted. That wasn't how shadows worked. A flickering movement at the edge of my vision made me spin. Down the hall, a shadow pooled unnaturally, stretching along the wall in a way that ignored the angles of the light. It wasn't mine. I walked faster, then faster still. Every door I passed looked the same, windowless, unmarked. Was anyone else in here? Had there been other test subjects? A voice crackled over the intercom. Return to your room. I ignored it. Return to your room. The air shifted. Something behind me. I turned, but nothing was there. My chest tightened. My feet moved on instinct. Faster. I needed to get out. The door at the end of the hall had a red exit sign above it. My heart leapt. I ran, my breath loud in my ears. But as I reached for the handle, the hallway lights flickered, and my shadow slammed into me. I felt it. Cold. Solid, like a second skin wrapping around my body. I gasped, stumbling backward. My limbs stiffened, and for one horrible second, I wasn't in control. My arms twitched, moved in ways I hadn't willed. Then, it let go. I collapsed to my knees, sucking in air. My shadow, if it was still mine, was back where it belonged, stretched thin beneath me. But something was different. It wasn't lagging anymore. It was leading. The intercom buzzed again, softer this time. You've progressed to the next phase. I swallowed hard. My fingers curled against the cold floor. I had a feeling I wasn't the one being studied anymore. I sat there, my palms pressing against the icy floor, trying to steady my breath. My shadow was still, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. The intercom crackled again. You are experiencing a temporary adjustment period. Do not be alarmed. Adjustment? My voice was raw. What the hell is happening to me? Silence. I turned back toward the exit. The door was still there, but now, something about it felt off. The edges blurred, like heat waves distorting the air. I reached out, fingers brushing the metal handle. The hallway flickered. Not the lights, the space itself. For a split second, I wasn't in the hallway. I was somewhere else. A darker place where walls pulsed like living things, and shadows slithered unnaturally across the floor. Then it was gone. I was back in the hallway, the exit door solid beneath my hand. I stumbled away from it, chest heaving. My shadow rippled beneath me, as if it had seen what I had. Return to your room. The voice was softer now, almost coaxing. I shook my head. No, I'm leaving. The moment I said it, the lights overhead flared, casting my shadow long and sharp against the floor. It twitched, shifted, then it rose. I scrambled back as my own darkness peeled itself away, standing upright in front of me. It had my shape, my outline, but it wasn't me. The head tilted, mimicking the way I moved, but with an eerie delay. My pulse pounded. The shadow took a step forward. I turned and ran. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, like I was running through a nightmare where the exit never came closer. My breath hitched, my legs ached. I dared a glance over my shoulder. It was following, fast. I reached another door, any door, and yanked it open. I threw myself inside, slamming it behind me. My hands fumbled for a lock, but there was none. The room was dark, the air thick with something stale and wrong. I turned and froze. I wasn't alone. Shapes loomed in the darkness. Shadows, some standing, some crouched, all shifting unnaturally. I backed against the door, my breath coming in short gasps. The intercom crackled once more, but this time the voice had changed. It was layered, as if more than one person or thing was speaking at once. You were never meant to leave. A ranger's discovery. The forest was too quiet that morning, the kind of silence that made Elias Crow's skin prickle beneath his ranger jacket. Late autumn had stripped the pines bare, leaving their branches like crooked fingers against a gray sky. He knelt beside the tracks, his breath fogging in the crisp air, and frowned. They weren't right. Too big for a bear, 16 inches heel to claw, and the stride was off, loping yet deliberate, almost human. He traced a finger along the edge of one print, where the mud held the faint curve of something like a toenail. Mountain lion, maybe, he muttered, though he didn't believe it. 20 years patrolling these woods, and had never seen anything like this. He straightened, brushing dirt off his knees, and scanned the clearing. The campsite was abandoned, fire pit cold, but a shredded backpack lay tangled in the underbrush. He picked it up, noting the claw marks, deep, ragged, like something had torn into it with purpose. A scrap of deer hide fluttered from the strap, stained with something dark and tacky. Blood, maybe. Elias adjusted his hat, the brim shadowing his tired hazel eyes, and tried to shake the unease creeping up his spine. Had seen plenty out here, lost hikers, bear attacks, even a meth lab once, but this felt different, wrong. His radio crackled at his hip, but he ignored it. No point calling it in yet. Dispatch would just laugh him off. Bigfoot sighting Crow. He followed the tracks a few yards, winding through the trees until they veered toward the old trailhead. That's when he remembered this was near where Danny went missing. 20 years ago, 2 dumb kids sneaking out to camp, and only one came back. Elias had told the cops Danny wandered off, drawn by some sound in the dark. Something's calling me, Danny had said, grinning like it was a game. Elias never saw him again. The guilt still gnawed at him, a dull ache he drowned in coffee and routine. A twig snapped behind him. Elias spun, hand on his holster, but it was just a squirrel darting up a trunk. He exhaled, cursing himself, getting jumpy over nothing. Still, he couldn't unsee the tracks, couldn't unhear the echo of Danny's voice in his head. He pulled out his phone, no signal, as usual, and snapped a photo of the prints. Evidence, something to show the old-timers at the diner, see if they'd spin one of their yarns about skinwalkers or whatever else they blamed for bad luck out here. The wind picked up, rattling the branches, and for a moment Elias swore it carried a sound, a low guttural moan that wasn't quite animal. He froze, listening, but it didn't come again, just the forest playing tricks. He slung the ruined backpack over his shoulder and headed back to his truck, the tracks stretching out behind him like a promise of something waiting in the shadows. Elias tossed the shredded backpack into the bed of his truck, the dull thunk of it hitting the metal echoing in the stillness. He rubbed his hands together, trying to shake the chill that wasn't just from the autumn air. The tracks gnawed at him, a puzzle he couldn't leave unsolved. He climbed into the cab, the familiar creak of the seat grounding him, and started the engine. Millie's diner was a 20-minute drive down the winding forest road, plenty of time to decide if he was overreacting or if something was truly off. The forest blurred past, a monochrome wash of browns and grays, until the neon sign of Millie's flickered into view, half its letters burnt out. So it read, Moralized Divas. The place was a relic, squat and weathered, with peeling paint and a gravel lot littered with cigarette butts. It was the heartbeat of this nowhere town. Half a dozen houses, a gas station, and a church that only opened for funerals, its steeple leaning like it was tired of standing. Elias parked beside a rusted pickup with a bumper sticker proclaiming "I brake for Sasquatch" and grabbed a backpack. Maybe someone here would recognize it, or at least spin a tale worth hearing. Inside, the air was thick with grease, and the ghosts of 1,000 fried breakfasts. The jukebox hummed a scratchy rendition of Mama Tried, and the fluorescent lights buzzed like trapped flies. Millie, all gray curls and sharp eyes, wiped the counter with a rag that seen better days. A handful of regulars dotted the room. Roy Tanner, hunched over a plate of hash browns. Mrs. Tully, knitting in her corner booth. Jimmy Platt, a wiry kid barely out of high school, nursing a Coke and scribbling in a notebook. And Lila Henshaw, a retired schoolteacher with a penchant for gossip, sipping tea by the window. "Crow," Millie rasped, voice like sandpaper from decades of Pall Malls. "You're early. Bad night or bad day already." She slid a chipped mug his way without asking. "Bad find," Elias said, dropping the backpack on the counter. The claw marks caught the light, ugly and raw, up by the old trailhead. Tracks, too, big, weird, not bare, not anything I know. "You seen this bag before?" Millie poured coffee, black as tar, and squinted at the damage. "Looks like something got mad at it. Hunters were in yesterday. Those loudmouths from downstate said the deer's been scarce, like something spooking him. Heard howling too, but not wolves. I told him it's the wind, always is." She tapped the counter with a chipped nail. "Roy, Ranger's got a chew toy for you." Roy shuffled over, his boots scuffing the linoleum. He was all sinew and stories, a trapper turned barstool prophet, after arthritis twisted his hands into claws of their own. He peered at the backpack, then at Elias, his eyes cloudy but sharp. "Skinwalker," he said, like he was diagnosing a cold. "Navasha witch gone feral. Sheds its skin, walks as a beast, mimics voices to lure you out. You hear anything funny up there?" Elias sipped the coffee, bitter and hot, and shrugged. "Just wind, Roy." Tracks were humanish though, too big for normal. Roy leaned in, tobacco breath curling between them. "My granddad saw one 52, tall as a pine, eyes like coals, followed him from dusk to dawn, whispering his name till he near lost his mind." "You find bones with it?" "No bones," Elias said, dodging the deer hide in his memory. "Just this." He didn't need Roy spinning a saga, not yet. Mrs. Tully's needles paused, her voice cutting through the hum. "Ain't no skinwalker, Roy. It's a Wendigo. Starved spirits, cursed from eating their own. This forest's got a hunger in it, Elias. Your kind know." Elios' jaw tightened. "My kin. Your folks," she said, resuming her knitting with a clack. "Crows go back to the settlers. Tough stock, till the winter of '73 broke 'em. Half starved, half vanished. Word was, some turned to meat they shouldn't have touched. Bad blood lingers." Millie snorted, but it was half-hearted. "Cannibals. Tully, you been reading Jimmy's scripts?" She glanced at the kid who looked up, grinning like he'd been caught. Could be aliens, or a Wendigo, and a skinwalker, tag team horror flick. Jimmy piped up, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Stick to your movies, kid," Elias said, though he cracked a faint smile. Jimmy was harmless, always dreaming up monsters for screenplays he'd never finish. Lila Henshaw set her teacup down with a clink, her voice prim but edged. "It's not a movie, James. My great-aunt lived through that winter. Said the crow's cabin was the last standing, till it wasn't. Found it empty, fire still smoldering, but tracks led off into the snow. Big ones, like you're saying. Folks didn't talk about it after bad luck." Elias' gut twisted. His dad had mentioned the homestead once, a rare sober night by the fire. Crows were survivors, he'd said, eyes distant. Hard times make hard choices. Then he'd clammed up, pouring another whiskey. Elias had been 10 too young to press. "Any of you recognize the bag?" he asked, steering back to solid ground. "Campers, hunters." "Nope," Millie said, crossing her arms. "But I check with Old Man Carver down the road. He's been here since dirt was new. knows every face that passes through. Roy grunted. Carver's half crazy. Thinks the woods talk to him. Maybe they do, Jimmy muttered, scribbling again. Lila tilted her head. He's not wrong, Roy. Carver's PA hunted with your granddad, Elias. If anyone's got a bead on this, it's him. Elias finished his coffee, left a crumpled 5 on the counter, and grabbed the backpack. Thanks for the history lesson. I'll check the logs, maybe swing by Carver's. But as he stood, Jimmy slid over, holding out a crumpled flyer. Lost dog, Rusty, red setter, last seen near trailhead, 10/28. Found this on the board, Jimmy said. Same spot, maybe. Owner's number's there. Elias pocketed it, nodding. Good catch. A missing dog wasn't much, but it was another thread. Outside, dusk was creeping in, the sky a bruise over the tree line. He drove to Carver's first, the cabin a sagging heap of logs and tin, surrounded by a chain-link fence. 3 dogs barked from the porch, all ribs and teeth, as Carver emerged, shotgun resting easy in his gnarled hands. Crow, he rasped, beard a white snarl. What's that you're hauling? Elias held up the backpack. Found it near the trailhead. Tracks, 2, big, wrong. You hear anything lately? Carver spat into the gravel. Heard it. 3 nights back, howling, deep like. Dogs wouldn't leave the porch, smelled something bad. Ain't no bear too smart, too quiet after. Woods been restless since your granddad's day. Restless how? Elias pressed, Carver's words echoing Lilas. Your PA never told you. Carver's eyes glinted. He hunted up there, 'fore you were born. Came back pale, said he saw shadows, tall ones, moving wrong. Quit hunting after. You watch yourself, boy. He retreated inside, door slamming. Elias drove to the ranger station, the road twisting through shadows that felt too alive. The station was a squat cabin, its porch sagging under years of neglect. Inside, he tossed the backpack on his desk and flipped open the logbook. Trail repairs. A lost hiker 2 weeks back. Coyotes near the river. No missing campers. But he called the number from Jimmy's flyer. A woman answered, voice frayed. Rusty's mine, she said. Disappeared last week. Chased something into the woods and didn't come back. You find him. Just a bag, Elias said. They'll keep an eye out. He hung up, adding Rusty, 10/28 to the log. He spread out a topo map, tracing the old trailhead, a mile from where he and Danny had camped. The memory clawed up. They'd been 14, Elias, quiet and cautious. Danny, all fire and dares. They'd swiped beers from Elias' dad and pitched a tent near the creek, laughing at ghost stories till the dark pressed in. Danny's mom, Ruth, had been furious, grounded him for a month before that night, but had snuck out anyway. She'd blamed Elias after, her screams echoing through the search. You should have stopped him. Mara had been there too, 11 and fearless, tagging along till their dad dragged her home. Shed moved away years ago, but last Christmas Shed asked, you ever wonder if Danny's still out there? Elias hadn't answered. Ruth had left town a year later, house still empty on Pine Street. He pulled out his laptop, uploaded the track photo, and zoomed in. The edges were too clean, the stride too purposeful. He searched Skinwalker, Shapeshifters, the trail, then Wendigo, gaunt, antlered, born from desperation. He slammed the laptop shut, the room closing in. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and there it was, that moan, low and guttural, weaving through the gusts. Elias grabbed his flashlight, stepped onto the porch, and swept the beam across the trees. The forest stared back, a wall of shadows, branches swaying like they were reaching. Nothing moved, or so he thought. He turned to go inside, boots scuffing the warped boards, when the wind shifted, sharp and cold, tugging at his jacket. It carried a faint clatter, like pebbles rolling, and his gaze dropped to the edge of the porch. There, where the dirt met the wood, a small pale shape gleamed, uncovered by the gust, as if the earth had spat it out. Elias froze, beam trembling as it locked on the object. A child's finger bone, delicate and scored with jagged teeth marks, half buried in the soil. The wind had peeled back a thin layer of leaves and dust, exposing it like a gift or a warning. His breath caught, the air suddenly too thick, and he crouched, hand hovering. It wasn't weathered like some old relic. The marks were fresh, the bone still faintly slick. "Danny," he whispered, the name slipping out like a plea, raw and unbidden. The wind snatched it, swirling it into the dark, and for a heartbeat, he swore he heard an answer. A faint laugh, high and familiar, drifting from the trees. He jerked upright, flashlights slashing the shadows. But the forest gave nothing back, just silence, heavy and watching. He scooped the bone into his pocket, its cold weight pressing against him, and stumbled inside, locking the door with shaking hands. Elias stood on the porch, the child's finger bone cold against his palm. The laugh, Danny's laugh, hung in the air, a thread of memory unraveling into the night. He clicked off the flashlight, letting the dark swallow him, and listened. The wind moaned through the pines, but nothing else came. No footsteps, no whispers, just his heartbeat, loud and unsteady. He shoved the bone into his jacket pocket, a grim keepsake, and stepped back inside, locking the door behind him. Sleep didn't come easy. The ranger station creaked like an old ship, every gust rattling the walls. He lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, the bone's weight pressing through his pocket. Denny's voice looped in his head. "Something's calling me," blending with Roy's skinwalker tales and Mrs. Hallie's Wendigo warnings. By dawn, exhaustion won, but his dreams were jagged. A figure too tall, too thin, antlers scraping the sky, eyes glinting like the bone in the dirt. Morning brought clarity, or at least purpose. Elias brewed coffee, strong enough to strip paint, and hauled out his gear. If something was out there, he'd find proof. He grabbed a pair of trail cams from the storage closet, their batteries still good, and packed his truck. Flashlight, flare gun, topo map, the backpack as a marker. The tracks were his lead, and he wasn't waiting for whatever made them to come knocking. Before heading out, he called Mara. She lived 3 states away now, a nurse with a husband and a kid, but she'd always been the one who understood him. The phone rang twice before her voice cut through, warm but tired. "Eli, you okay? It's early." "Yeah, just checking in." He lied, pacing the station. "You remember that night with Danny?" A pause, hard to forget. "Why?" "Found something weird out here. Tracks. A torn-up bag. Made me think of him. He didn't mention the bone. Not yet." "Eli, don't go digging up ghosts. You've carried that long enough." Her tone sharpened. "You hear something out there, you call me. Okay? Not just the cops." "Promise," he said, though he wasn't sure he meant it. He hung up, the guilt a familiar ache, and drove to the old trailhead. The forest woke slow under a leaden sky, mist curling through the trees. He parked where the gravel gave way to dirt and slung the first cam over his shoulder. The tracks were still there, crisp in the mud, leading deeper into the pines. He followed, setting the first cam on a sturdy trunk, its lens aimed along the path. The second went a quarter-mile in, strapped to a boulder overlooking a ravine. He worked fast, the silence pressing heavier with each step, until the trail dipped into a hollow where the air smelled of damp rot. On the way back, he stopped at Old Man Carver's place, a ramshackle cabin off the main road. Carver was a local myth, 90 if he was a day, living alone with a shotgun and a pack of mangy dogs. Elias knocked, the backpack in hand, and the old man answered, squinting through a tangle of white beard. "Pro," Carver grunted, voice like gravel. "What's that mess?" "Found it up near the trailhead," Elias said, showing the claw marks. "Tracks too big, wrong. You see anything lately?" Carver spat into the dirt, heard it, howling. 3 nights back, dogs went crazy, wouldn't leave the porch, and no bear too smart, too quiet after. "Woods been restless since your granddad's day." "Restless how?" Carver's eyes narrowed. "Ask your past old hunting stories." He knew. He slammed the door, leaving Elias with more questions than answers. Back at the station, he waited. The cams were motion-triggered, uploading via a spotty satellite link. He busied himself with paperwork, overdue trail erosion reports, but his eyes kept flicking to the laptop. By dusk, the first ping came. He opened the feed, breath-catching. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 5:47 p.m., a blur of movement, too fast to track. He rewound, frame by frame. There, a figure, tall and emaciated, hunched against the twilight. Antler-like protrusions jutted from its skull, limbs bent wrong, Like a marionette cut loose, it paused, head cocked, staring at the lens with eyes that burned white in the infrared. Then, it was gone. Jesus, Elias muttered, rewinding again. The second cam pinged minutes later. Same hollow, same figure. Closer now. It moved with purpose, circling back toward the station. He checked the map. The hollow was 3 miles out, but the tracks suggested it could cover ground fast. He grabbed his radio, thumb hovering, but stopped. Monster on my trail cams. He'd be a laughing stock, or worse. He called Millie instead. You got anyone who can check a tape? Something's out here. Jimmy's your man, she said. Kid's got a laptop and too much time. I'll send him up. Jimmy arrived an hour later, all nervous energy and monster energy cans. He plugged into Elias' system, eyes widening at the footage. Holy shit, man. That's not CGI. Look at the shadow. Consistent, real. You've got a cryptid. Not helping, Elias snapped, but Jimmy's excitement was contagious. They pulled stills, zooming in. The antlers weren't bone, more like twisted branches, woven into the skull. The skin looked flayed, peeling in strips. Skinwalker vibes, Jimmy said. But the starvation look. Wendigo. You're in deep, Crow. Shut up and save it, Elias said. But his mind raced. He sent Jimmy off with a copy, telling him to keep quiet. Alone again, he stared at the screen. The thing knew he was watching. It wanted him to see. The next day, he went back, armed flare gun in his holster, knife on his belt. He retraced the tracks past the cams. They veered off trail, through brambles, stopping at a creek, its banks slick with frost. Across the water, a cave mouth loomed, half hidden by vines, exhaling a sour stench. He waded through, boots slipping, and climbed the bank, flashlight shaking in his grip. Inside, the cave swallowed light. The beam danced over damp walls. A pile of bones, deer, rabbit, some human. A ribcage gnawed clean, a femur split for marrow. His stomach turned, but he pressed deeper. The air growing colder, thicker. The beam caught a scrap of fabric, blue, faded, snagged on a rock. He crouched, heart hammering. Danny's jacket, torn and crusted with black. Danny, he whispered, voice echoing. The cave answered, a growl, low and rising. He spun, flare gun raised, but the beam found shadows. Footsteps circled, heavy, deliberate. He fired the flare, red light erupting, and there it was. Taller than any man. Its skin hung loose, gray and mottled, peeling like a shed husk. Antlers or something like them, sprouted from a too narrow skull, framing eyes that glowed with sickly hunger. Claws clicked, jaws slack with jagged teeth. Not just Wendigo, not just Skinwalker, a hybrid, born from ancient wrongness. It lunged, claws slashing. Elias swung the knife, catching its arm. It shrieked. A child screamed through a broken radio and recoiled, black blood dripping. He ran, splashing through the creek, branches clawing his face, until he reached the truck. He locked the doors, hands shaking, and floored it back. At the station, he barricaded the door and pored over the map. The cave sat near the old Crow homestead site, abandoned since the 1870s. He dug out a ledger, incident reports 1870 to 1880. One entry, January 1874. Settlement lost to storm. 12 souls unaccounted. Survivor claims kin turned to cannibal acts in hunger. Tracks found inhuman, leading north, area deemed cursed. Below Ezekiel Crow. His ancestor, Elias mug shattered on the floor. Mrs. Tully was right. His blood birthed. This. He called Mara again, voice tight. You ever hear Dad talk about the homestead? Once, she said, hesitant, said it was haunted, that Grandpa saw things, tall shadows, voices. Why? Found something, old reports. Our family might have done something bad. Eli, get out of there, now. Too late, he said, hanging up as the wind carried his name. Danny's voice, pleading, Elias, help me. The cams pinged the creature, pacing the ridge. Speaking now, Danny's voice, Mara's, his dad's. Hard times, son. He wasn't waiting. He loaded flares, strapped on his knife, and drove back. The forest a tunnel of shadows. At the creek, he waded in, the cave's stench pulling him forward. Inside, the bones shifted, shadows stretching. The creature crouched atop the pile, Danny's jacket in its claws. "You left me," it said, Danny's voice cracking, then growling. "You let me go." "You're not him," Elias said, flare gun trembling, but its eyes, hazel, like Danny's, twisted his gut. It smiled, teeth glinting, and dropped the jacket. "Come closer," it hissed, Mara's voice now. "See what we've become." He fired, the flare streaking, but it darted aside, vanishing. The cave rumbled, dust falling. It wasn't just hunting him, it was claiming him, tying him to the curse his family sowed. Elias stood in the cave's mouth, flare gun trembling, the red glow of his last shot fading into the dark. The creature's words, "See what we've become," echoed in Mara's voice, then Danny's, a chorus of the lost twisting his resolve. The air was thick with rot and cold, the bone pile beneath the thing glinting like a throne of ruin. He clutched the topo map in his free hand, creased and damp, its lines anchoring him. The cave sat dead center of the old Crow homestead site. He'd triple-checked it against the ledger. This wasn't random, it was his family's grave, and he'd walked right into it. The creature shifted, its antlered silhouette blurring as it circled, claws scraping stone. Elias backed toward the entrance, boots slipping. "You're not them," he said, louder, as if conviction could sever the doubt. But those hazel eyes, Danny's eyes, burned through the gloom, and its crooked smile split a jagged maw. "You left me," it growled, Danny's voice cracking into a snarl. "Left us all." It lunged, faster than before, and Elias dove aside, the flare gun clattering away. Claws sparked against the wall, and he scrambled for his knife, slashing upward. Black blood splattered, the thing shrieking, half human, half beast. He bolted for the creek, splashing through icy water, the map crumpling in his fist. The forest swallowed him, branches snapping, lungs burning. Behind, the creature's howl rose, rage, personal, ancient. He reached the truck, slammed the door, and floored it back to the station. The rearview mirror, empty but his pulse screaming. Inside, he barricaded the door, chest heaving. The topo map lay crumpled on the floor. He snatched it up, smoothing it. The homestead was a bullseye, the cave its heart, tracks radiating like veins. He grabbed the ledger, cannibal axe, tracks, inhuman area cursed. Below in faded ink, EC fled north, pursued by shadow. His ancestor had run, leaving this behind. The radio crackled, Millie, frantic. Elias, "Jimmy's gone AWOL, left a note about proving it. Heading your way." "Shit," Elias muttered. He dialed Jimmy, voicemail. The kid was chasing his cryptid, and Elias knew where the cave. He couldn't leave him. He reloaded the flare gun, 2 shots, strapped the knife tighter, and grabbed a gas can from the shed. Fire had hurt it. Fire might end it, but he needed more. He rummaged the storage closet, finding a rusted bear trap and a coil of rope, crude, but something. The drive back was a blur, the forest a tunnel under a moonless sky. He parked a half-mile out, topo map tucked into his jacket, and hiked in, flashlight off. The creek glinted, the cave's stench stronger, meat and ash. A whimper echoed, not the creature, but Jimmy. Elias crept inside, knife out, eyes adjusting. The bone pile loomed, larger fresh additions glistening. Jimmy slumped against the wall, glasses cracked, leg bent wrong, blood streaking his jacket. He was alive, shallow breaths. "Crow?" Jimmy croaked. "Tit got me." "Wanted proof, stupid." "Hold on," Elias whispered, binding Jimmy's gash with a shirt strip. "We're getting out." A laugh slithered from the shadows. Danny's, Mara's, then a Raph's. The creature emerged, dragging Rusty's corpse, collar glinting. It tossed the dog atop the pile, a taunt, and fixed Elias with hazel eyes. "Your blood," it hissed, his dad's slur. "Your curse. Join us." Elias hauled Jimmy up. Backing toward the entrance, the creature stalked forward, claws clicking, skin peeling wet. He splashed the gas can across the bone pile, the walls, but kept half, rope in hand. The thing paused, head tilting. "For Danny," he said, firing a flare into the fuel. Flames roared, swallowing the bones. The creature shrieked, lunging through fire, antlers ablaze. Elias swung the knife, catching its throat. Black blood sprayed. It clawed his arm, deep and searing, but he shoved Jimmy out, diving after as the cave blazed. They stumbled to the creek, collapsing as smoke billowed. The screams twisted. Danny's pleas, Myra's cries, then deepened, the cave trembling. Elias looked back. The creature burst through the flames, burning but alive, charging across the water. "Move!" he yelled, dragging Jimmy toward the trees. The thing was faster, fire trailing, eyes locked on him. Elias dropped the rope, grabbed the bear trap, and snapped it open, tossing it into the mud. The creature hit it, metal clamped its leg, bone crunching. It roared, thrashing, flames licking higher. Elias pulled Jimmy behind a pine, gaskin still in hand. The creature tore free, trap dangling, and lunged again. He hurled the can, fuel arced, splashing its burning form, and fired his last flare. The explosion was deafening, a fireball erupting as the creature became a torch. It staggered, shrieking every voice it knew. Danny, Myra, his dad, Ruth, then collapsed, a writhing pyre. The forest shook, trees groaning, as if the curse itself screamed. Elias shielded Jimmy, heat searing his face, arm bleeding freely. The thing clawed the ground, antlers cracking, skin sloughing into ash. Its hazel eyes met his flickering. Danny's, then empty. It stilled, fire consuming what remained, a blackened husk curling in the mud. Jimmy coughed, clutching his leg. Dead. Elias nodded, shaking. Think so. His arm throbbed, claw marks oozing. He pulled the topo map out, tracing the homestead's charred spot. The cave burned behind, smoke rising like a signal. Had ended it, hadn't he? He got Jimmy to the truck, radioing Millie, medic, Trailhead Road. "Jimmy's hurt." She cursed but promised help. As they waited, Elias bandaged his arm, gas fumes lingering on his hands. The forest was quiet, wind carrying ash. Medics took Jimmy, broken leg, shock, alive. Elias stayed at the station, topo map spread, ledger open. He called Mara, voice raw. "It's done." Burned it out. "Eli, what happened?" "Family curse. Ended it." He didn't mention the claw marks, the doubt. "Come stay with us," she said. "Please." "Maybe," he lied, hanging up. He faced the mirror. His hazel eyes stared back, tired, steady, until they glinted, sharp and hungry. He blinked, and it was gone. Just his face, pale and worn. He turned away, map crumpling under his fist, and poured coffee. No voices came. Not yet. Days later, Millie called. "Jimmy's talking. Says you're a hero. Wants to write it." "Skip the hero part," Elias said. "Keep my name out." He hung up, glancing at the map. The fire had spread. Rangers reported a contained blaze near the homestead site. Cave collapsed. He packed a bag, flare gun, knife, map, locked the station, and drove toward Morris. The road wound through pines, headlights slicing dark. A mile out, he slowed. A bone glinted by the trees. Small, scored, fresh. The wind whispered, "Elias." He dropped it, floored the gas, and didn't look back. His arm itched, and Morris mirror waited. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.